Chapter 2175. Black words flashed in the sky of the divine ruins world. Countless cultivators seemed to have sensed it and looked up. The words were not big, but they were easily reflected in everyone's eyes. As they breathed, the words flickered. The Axian Yuan calendar was a calendar that had never been recorded in the history of the divine ruins world. The illusory god palace was a mysterious place that no one had ever heard of. Everyone was puzzled and looked at the sky in a daze. However, they seemed to have been inspired by something and gradually yearned for it. It seemed that after that, something was summoning the world. Family E. When Jun Juqing returned to the family E, the guards at the gate immediately bowed. Greetings, family head. Their voices and expressions were extremely respectful. When their eyes swept over the half-folded divine vulture standing on Jun Juqing's shoulder, a deep sense of fear flashed across their eyes. A few months ago, they did not treat Jun Juqing like this. In a short period of time, Jun Juqing had taken over the position of family head and had the entire family firmly in his hands. Anyone with a brain in the family knew how to face this young family head with a different surname. Jun Juqing nodded and was about to walk in. Suddenly, he sensed a strange movement in the sky and looked up. The two guards also looked up curiously, their faces filled with shock and confusion. Why were there words in the sky? Jun Juqing narrowed his eyes slightly, but he did not seem surprised. After a moment, he retracted his gaze. Pass down the order. All the elders of the family are to head to the hall immediately. There's something important to discuss. The two guards did not know what was going on, but they immediately obeyed. Yes. After Jun Juqing left, the two of them looked at each other. Something big was going to happen in the divine ruins world. Nan family. The current Nan family had fallen apart. Only Nan Jinshu, who used to be one of the elders, managed to rise to the position of family head. He was Nan Yifan's younger cousin, and had coveted the position of family head for many years. Unfortunately, his strength was always a bit weaker than Nan Yifan's. It was only after Nan Yifan died and the clan fell into chaos that he finally got the chance. After the calamity of the Peach Blossom Cove, the Nan family had suffered heavy losses. They were no longer comparable to the Nan family at their peak. However, the Nan family had been passed down for thousands of years after all. They still had a certain foundation. Nan Jinshu had been ordering everyone in the Nan family to recuperate and recover their vitality. Even if they couldn't be as high and mighty as before, they could still barely contend with some of the first-rate families. Of course, Yuntian Tower was an exception. Nan Jinshu was stunned for a long time when he saw the line of words in the sky. Then, he seemed to have thought of something and became excited. The rumors about the ancestors are actually true. Phoenix God Mountain. When Yi Zhao returned, he did not deliberately hide his whereabouts. In fact, the matter of him and Mao Zhen heading to the Crimson Moon Desert together had already spread among the two great ancient divine beast clans. Therefore, there was no need to hide anymore. He went straight to the Phoenix Temple. When Elder Yu saw him, he was immediately delighted. Patriarch, you're back. How's Dumpling? The news had spread like wildfire outside. He was basically certain that Dumpling was safe. However, he could only be at ease when he asked about this matter properly. Yi Zhao shook his head. Someone forcefully opened her sixth meridian. Fortunately, Shangguanyu broke through to the Supreme God realm in time and helped her recover a lot. After recuperating for a period of time, there should be no major problems. Elder Yu was shocked. He almost thought that he had misheard. Someone forcefully opened her meridian. How is that possible? Who in the world has such ability? Also, that's not right. Dumpling's talent is already rare. She opened her fifth meridian at such a young age. What was the person who forced her to open her meridian by force? Yi Xiao took a deep breath. He put one hand behind his back and frowned. That's what I'm worried about. We've encountered some trouble in the Crimson Moon Desert, but we haven't found out who the mastermind is. Elder Yu's lips moved. His expression changed, and huge waves surged in his heart. Yi Xiao went with Mao Jin. If he guessed correctly, something must have happened to Ziqin. The two of them working together could be considered invincible. However, even they couldn't find anything. He felt a strong sense of uneasiness. He felt that there was something strange about this that he couldn't explain. Yi Xiao said, "Send more people later. You must investigate thoroughly. Don't let go of any clues." "Yes. I'll go now." Elder Yu had just turned around. Before he walked out of the square in front of the Phoenix Shrine, he suddenly felt something strange in the sky. He looked up. What he saw immediately caused him to be startled. "Patriarch! Look!" Yi Xiao had already looked up. That line of words flickered silently in the sky and was clearly reflected in everyone's eyes. "Patriarch, this is..." Elder Yu was about to ask something when he saw Yi Xiao suddenly turn around and quickly enter the Phoenix Shrine. At the same time, the barrier outside the Phoenix Shrine flickered, and the pressure became even stronger. Elder Yu's heart trembled. What is the Patriarch planning? He stood in place and pondered for a while. Then, he walked toward Fenghuang Valley. As expected, many people in the clan were looking at the words that suddenly appeared with different expressions. Elder Yu's heart tightened. Yi Xiao entered the Phoenix Shrine. He was silent and hurried along the way. Finally, he arrived before the huge mural in the middle of the shrine. Ancestor. He stared deeply at the figure of the ancestor who emerged from the fire. The Illusion God Palace's heavenly gate is finally opening again. The shrine was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. The figure on the mural remained silent. Peach Blossom Cove. This line of words appeared above their heads at the same time. Tang Ku, who had just finished refining the second batch of divine artifacts, stopped and looked up. He furrowed his brows, but they quickly smoothed out. Suli also stopped and asked curiously. What's that? Where is the Illusion God Palace? The Heavenly Gate is a gate. Tang Ku looked at her and shook his head. When the time is right, everything will be solved. Do you still want to continue? He was asking about the artifact refinement. Suli paused and nodded. That's true. Then let's continue. The two of them had always been neck and neck, so she had always wanted to see who was the better one. As for the sudden appearance of the words, just as Tang Ku said, what would come would come. When the time was right, everything would be known. Everyone heard the conversation between the two and felt conflicted. Little Mina stretched lazily, squinted his eyes, and muttered weakly, that's right. The two of them have already refined 13 venerable divine artifacts each. Why do they still want to continue, after looking at the mural day and night for so long? Even if they weren't tired, she was. She walked to Cinyi's side. Big brother, can I go to sleep? Cinyi's expression was indifferent. No. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2176. Little Hachi pursed her lips. She knew it. Big brother definitely wouldn't let her slack off on such an occasion. But I'm really sleepy. She leaned forward and pointed at her eyes. Big brother, I haven't slept for so long. The dark circles under my eyes are a lot heavier. Cinyi didn't even look at her. You can sleep here. Little Hachi, after so many years, Big brother was still as heartless as ever. She knew she shouldn't have counted on him. Little Hachi wrinkled her nose. Fine, I'll sleep. She took a few steps back and bumped into someone. She turned around and saw that it was Enchanting. At this moment, she was so tired that she was about to go berserk. When she saw that it was Enchanting, she didn't think too much and patted Enchanting's shoulder. "Lord Enchanting, let me sleep on your shoulder for a while." Besides, Enchanting was one of Rongshio's people. He wouldn't be as scared of Big Brother as Sansan and the others. Thinking about it this way, he was indeed the most reliable person. Little Hachi actually felt a little happy at this thought. As she spoke, her soft and boneless hand had already silently climbed onto Enchanting's arm. She narrowed her eyes and was about to lean her head over. At this moment, Enchanting suddenly grabbed her wrist and took half a step away. Little Hachi's head missed and she instantly sobered up. She looked at Enchanting blankly. Enchanting's voice was calm. "Miss Little Hachi, this isn't appropriate." "Little Hachi. What's not appropriate?" Enchanting paused. "It's not appropriate in any way. How could a young lady casually lean on a man's shoulder and fall asleep?" He didn't mind, but there were so many people watching. It wasn't good for her. "Miss Little Hachi, if you're really sleepy, why don't you go back to sleep?" Little Hachi widened her eyes. "But Big Brother won't let me go back to sleep." "Didn't you hear it?" Enchanting glanced at Sunny. Actually, it didn't matter if Little Hachi stayed or not. She didn't know why Sunny refused to let her go back. Seeing how unmoved Sunny was, it seemed like he wouldn't change his mind. This was the matter of the 13th year, so he couldn't say much. "If I don't sleep now, I'll really die." Little Hachi pursed her red lips and stretched out a finger to poke Enchanting's shoulder. "Look. Are you made of paper? You can't even let me lean on you. I want to sleep, I want to sleep." Her fingers, which were painted with delicate nail polish, were as slender as a scallion. She tapped on his shoulder again and again. I poked. I poked. I poked and prodded. Enchanting finally caught her hand. "Go to sleep." Little Hachi's brain was already confused. When she heard that she could sleep, she immediately became happy. Her head tilted, and she fell over. But this time, they still didn't reach their destination. Enchanting reached out and held her forehead. Little Hachi blinked. Enchanting waved his hand, and a ball of light that flickered with a faint blue light appeared in front of him. "You can go in and sleep," Enchanting said. "There are bedding inside. Don't worry, everything is new." As for why he had this kind of thing, it had to be traced back to a long time ago. His master ordered him to prepare it. He prepared a lot. Some were given to his master to use, and the rest was left with him. Little Hachi was speechless. She was completely awake now. No need. Little Hachi took a deep breath. Enchanting frowned slightly. "Aren't you very sleepy?" "Don't worry, it's an independent small space inside, and there's a barrier." Little Hachi closed her eyes. She was afraid that if she saw Enchanting's face again, she wouldn't be able to resist scratching a few beautiful blood flowers. "I don't like this color." Little Hachi gritted her teeth and said. Enchanting thought for a moment and asked hesitantly, "Then, change it to powder?" "You're the one who wants to sleep with powder. Your whole family is sleeping with powder." Little Hachi finally lost her temper. After saying that fiercely, she turned around and left. Not only was she not sleepy now, but she was also very energetic. At the side, 13 asked nervously. "Sister 8 seems to be angry," Shifang said. "When has she not been angry when talking to Lord Enchanting?" 13, that's true. After so many years of experience, the 13U sect knew very well that when Little Hachi was angry, they must not talk to her. It was best if they didn't even look at her. Hence, they looked away in unison and looked at Tang Ku and Su Li. Yujo, it's such a blessing to watch two seniors refine artifacts. Sanson, that's right. I can still watch for another 100 years. Tsunyi finally spoke. Little Hachi. Little Hachi immediately pounced over with tears in her eyes. Big brother. Did Big Brother finally change his mind? Could she go back to sleep? Tsunyi raised his chin and asked, do you know how many divine artifacts the two of you have refined up until now? Little Hachi was stunned. I know. It's good that you know. Only then did Tsunyi give her a precious look. Seeing that you're very energetic now, we'll refine pills according to this number. As for the type of pills, you know in your heart. Little Hachi's forehead twitched. She shouldn't have rejected Yen Qin just now. Red Moon Desert. That line of words flickered with each breath. Snow kept falling from the sky, and the surrounding snow became thicker and thicker, but it avoided this ice lake. After a moment, the purple scale flew back to Chu Liuyue's hand. She looked down and saw that the light on it was much dimmer than before. Chu Liuyue slowly clenched her fists. They're not here. Her brows were tightly knitted together, and her heart felt like it was being squeezed by something. Cold snowflakes and ice particles kept blowing on her head and face. There was already a layer of sparkling ice and snow on her eyelashes. They are in the Illusion God Palace. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2177. However, what kind of place was the Illusory God Palace? She had no idea. Right now, the connection between her and Debeo had been severed. The only thing that could still be maintained was this piece of scale armor. But from the situation of this scale armor, Debeo's situation was also very worrying. Chu Liuyue looked around. Between heaven and earth, there was nothing at all. She suddenly thought of the pavilion in the sky from before. Could it be the Illusory God Palace? She muttered under her breath. At this time, the words on the ice lake slowly disappeared. Rong Xiao held her hand. We can't stay here for long. Let's go back first and discuss this matter. Chu Liuyue was about to nod when she suddenly thought of something. Wait first. She broke free from Rong Xiao's hand and flew towards the ice lake. Rong Xiao frowned and was about to go over when he heard Chu Liuyue say, don't come over first. Rong Xiao stopped in his tracks. Nan Su Huai looked at Rong Xiao and also stopped, but his face was still full of worry. What are you doing? This place is very dangerous. You must be careful. Everything here was very strange, and it really made people worried. Chu Liuyue nodded. Thank you, Master. I know what to do. Swish. A rainbow light flashed. Scarlet Heaven sword appeared in her hand. She held it tightly and stood on the ice lake. The cold wind from the snowy plains blew the ice and snow, rolling up the corners of her clothes. Her hair fluttered in the wind, but a thin layer of frost quickly condensed on the ends of her hair. It could be seen that the temperature here was very low and the weather was very cold. Chu Liuyue looked at the ice below her feet. The originally clear lake water had already frozen into a thick layer of ice. It was sparkling and translucent, making people unable to see the scene inside. In fact, she had always been very curious about what was under the lake water. She had stayed in the Red Moon Desert for a long time and had seen Debeo and the others walk out of the lake several times. But she had never gone down herself. She had always been smart and quick-witted. She could tell that Debao and the others didn't really want to talk about these things, so she didn't ask anything about it. However, at this moment, a strong sense of curiosity surged from the bottom of her heart. Since Debao and the other two were no longer here, she wanted to see what secrets were hidden below. She quickly circulated the force in her body and poured it all into Scarlet Heaven's sword. Wang! A sword hum rang out. On Scarlet Heaven's sword, scarlet gold and transparent flames intertwined and burned fiercely. Chu Liyue held his sword with both hands and raised it high. Then, he swung it down viciously. Clang! The sharp edge of the sword cut into the ice, producing a crisp sound. Crack! A crack quickly spread out on the ice surface. At the same time, the flames on the Scarlet Heaven sword quickly followed the crack in an instant. The blazing heat began to melt the layer of ice. More and more tiny cracks appeared and spread in all directions. Chu Liyue held her breath and stared intently. However, at this moment, the snow and ice falling from the sky suddenly gathered in this direction. Snowflakes fell on the flames and cracks. The flames gradually extinguished, and the cracks gradually recovered. The crack that Chu Liyue had slashed with all her strength was easily restored to its original state. How could this be? Chu Liyue looked at the smooth ice surface and almost couldn't believe her eyes. Now that she was a god, she didn't hold back in the sword just now. Even if it was a mountain, this sword could raise it to the ground. However, there was only a shallow crack on the surface of the ice. Even if she had thought of igniting the flames in advance, it was still futile. In less than 15 minutes, all traces on the ice surface had been erased. At a glance, it was clean. Even the rippling patterns didn't change in the slightest. Her sword, it didn't have any effect on it at all. Cold air came from all directions, piercing into her body like steel needles. A dazzling light flashed on her body and covered her with a layer of transparent and gorgeous soft armor. Only then did it expel the cold air. Chu Liyue didn't believe it and slashed again. Clang! The moment the sword landed, a Xian formation suddenly appeared under the ice surface. A wave of indescribable pressure spread out from the top. Chu Liyue was the first to bear the brunt. When she sensed the aura, she already knew that something was wrong. Immediately after, a crisp cracking sound was heard. Crack! A look of horror flashed across her face. That was because the Scarlet Heaven sword in her hand broke the moment it was enveloped by the light of the Xian formation. She didn't even think and immediately retreated. A ray of light wrapped around the Scarlet Heaven sword and came over. Rong Xiao immediately attacked. A ray of golden light flickered and quickly passed by Chu Liyue's palm. The Scarlet Heaven sword was instantly cut in half. Almost at the same time, the broken sword body shattered into countless tiny pieces. The Scarlet Heaven sword was completely destroyed. Chu Liyue lowered her head and saw that there was only a broken sword hilt left in her hand. She immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. Rong Xiao went forward and grabbed her waist, bringing her away from the lake. Then, he took a step forward and protected her behind him. On the ice surface, the Xian formation gradually appeared and flickered. Rong Xiao's eyes that were as deep as the sea seemed to be gradually rippling. Nan Su Hui rushed over in a hurry. Are you all right? Chu Liyue shook her head and looked at the lake with a complicated gaze. Whose seal is that? Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2178. It was a Xian formation, and also a seal. It was extremely complicated, and its pressure was extremely strong. She had been in the Red Moon Desert for many years, but she had never seen this seal before. But strangely, for some reason, she felt that the aura on it was somewhat familiar. She thought of that eye. The dangerous moon was approaching. What secrets were hidden below? There are layers of restrictions below. I'm afraid we can't go in. Rong Xiao said. Chu Liyue nodded and summoned a long sword. It was the venerable divine weapon that she had refined with the Star Darkness sword embryo. Half of it was pure gold, the other half was dark green. It was especially bright against the white snow. With a thought, a flame surged out and melted the broken hilt of the Scarlet Heaven sword. The artifact's spirit was refined, and under the guidance of the flame, it fused with the new sword. The Star Darkness sword embryo is forged, so it should be called the Star Darkness sword. The sword was shining brightly, and its sword chi was sharp. It was indeed a pity that the Scarlet Heaven sword was destroyed. Fortunately, she had personally refined this Star Spectre sword, which was perfect. Chu Luiyue looked at Rongxiu. De Bao and the others are most likely trapped in the Illusion God Palace. We need to find that place quickly. De Bao and the other two had been trapped in the Red Moon Desert for tens of thousands of years and had never left. But this time, the three of them had disappeared very suddenly. This made her feel very uneasy. Rongxiu paused for a while and said, "I know where the Illusion God Palace is. Tens of thousands of miles away." In a dark and cramped cell, Dugu Mabao sat alone. His soft armor-like purple robe was damaged in several places, and his body was covered in blood. It seemed that he had just gone through an intense battle. After a while, a hoarse and rough voice came. "Have you thought it through?" Dugu Mabao did not react as if he did not hear it. The voice chuckled. "Tens of thousands of years of imprisonment and torture can't make you waver." Dugu Mabao was still unmoved. His pale face was stained with dried dark red blood, which made him look even more haggard. But his back was straight like a pine tree in the snow, with a noble arrogance that went deep into his bones. This attitude seemed to make the other party a little angry. "Dugu Mabao, you're very stubborn. But have you thought about whether those two people are like you? If you don't relent, they'll have to suffer another day of torture. No matter what, they are friends who have accompanied you for 10,000 years. Can you really bear to leave them to die?" Dugu Mabao's eyebrows moved. That pair of demonic purple eyes flashed with a cold light. "You don't dare to kill them." His voice was calm and firm. Every word was like a heavy hammer that smashed into the empty and dark cage. The voice quieted down. After a while, it said, I won. It's a pity that Lan Xiao has just refined his divine body, but compared to Diwu Zhangzi, he's still better. You know how painful it is to enter the illusionary god ocean without a divine body. After all, you've already experienced it tens of thousands of years ago, haven't you? That voice had a hint of smugness as if a prank had succeeded. It was cold and sinister, making one's heart tremble. Dugu Mabao's hands curled up in his sleeves, and his voice turned colder. "You'll be punished for breaking the contract." To the other party sneered in disdain. "Dugu Mabao, you're the one who broke the contract first, aren't you? You've already broken the taboo by reconstructing your divine body. Lan Xiao is your man, so it's fine. But, when Diwu chose to betray you, he should have known that this day would come. It seems like these 10,000 years of punishment didn't teach him enough of a lesson." The corners of Dugu Mabao's lips suddenly curled into an extremely faint arc. "He betrayed you and is still stubborn to this day. Doesn't that mean that you're a failure?" Smack! As soon as he finished speaking, a long whip viciously lashed Dugu Mabao's back in the darkness. His skin instantly split open. He groaned, and blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. The mockery in his eyes became even more intense. The illusionary god palace's heaven gate is about to open. Everything will come to a conclusion. When that time comes, you'll know how foolish your actions today were. That voice lingered in the cage for a long time before finally dispersing. After confirming that the person had left, Dugu Mabao's body swayed, and he coughed violently. His mouth was filled with the thick smell of blood. After coughing for a while, he casually wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He placed his hands on his knees and continued to sit cross-legged, waiting. The heaven gate is about to open. You, should be coming soon, right? A hint of worry flashed across his brows, but it quickly disappeared. You know. Chu Liuyue's eyes flashed with deep shock. Why didn't you mention it before? Rong Xiao smiled faintly. You didn't ask before. Anne. I'm not the only one who knows about this place. Senior Zi Zhao and Mao Jin, as well as some first-rate families with thousands of years of history, should have heard of it. Chu Luyue came back to his senses. This is a place that exists in distant legends. It is said that tens of thousands of years ago, a mysterious place appeared in the world of divine ruins. It was called the Illusory God Palace. There, the energy of heaven and earth was abundant, resources were abundant, and experts were as common as clouds. More importantly, if one could enter and cultivate, it was very likely that one would break through the shackles of a god and become an even more powerful existence. But later on, for some reason, that place disappeared. Gradually, fewer and fewer people knew about it. There were also people who speculated that the Illusory God Palace was a divine relic. Every tens of thousands of years, it would descend to the world to cross the threshold and become a peerless expert. However, these are all rumors, and no one has personally witnessed it. I just didn't expect it to appear now. Chu Luyue muttered, break through to a god. In the world of divine ruins, for nearly 10,000 years, no one had succeeded in breaking through that shackle. Duge Mabao and the other two seemed to be such existences, but for some reason, they had been suppressed in the Red Moon Desert for tens of thousands of years, and the world didn't know of their existence. Suddenly, her pupils shrank. Wait, when that strange palace appeared here, there were rumors in the world of divine ruins that it was related to breaking through to a god. Could it be the Illusory God Palace? Or is it closely related to the Illusory God Palace? Rong Xiao paused. At that time, the fog was everywhere. Did you see the words on the plaque? Chu Luyue shook her head. In fact, because of the white fog, she didn't even get a glimpse of the palace. She only remembered the black jade square and the magnificent and towering circular wall. Perhaps we will know everything when we reach the Illusory God Palace. Chu Luyue clenched the purple scale in her hand, pursed her lips, and nodded. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2179. Chu Luyue and the other two stayed in the Red Moon Desert for about 10 days as they wanted to find some relevant traces. Unfortunately, he didn't get any useful information after all that effort. Instead, the weather was getting colder, and the snow was getting thicker. Even they were starting to feel a bit tormented. Chu Luyue tried a few more times to split open the frozen lake surface, but all of her attempts ended in failure without exception. The seal floated quietly on the surface of the ice. It flickered lightly, but it also carried with it an unparalleled pressure. In the end, they could only choose to leave for now. According to Rong Xiao, Chu Luyue planned to return to Peach Blossom Cove first, then discuss the Illusion God Palace with Mao Jin and Yi Zhao. Nan Su Huai wanted to go with them, but after careful consideration, he returned to Lingxiao College first. Chu Luyue and Rong Xiao had just returned to the Yu residence when Cini greeted them. Master, Your Highness. Chu Luyue asked as they walked in, how are Tang Ku and Sir Su? When we came back, there wasn't much activity at Qingshui Cliff. Master, the two seniors just finished their competition and are resting in their residences. Chu Luyue was a bit surprised. Just now. They just finished. Based on their refining speed, it shouldn't have taken that long, right? Cini nodded and explained, yes. The two of them refined a lot of divine artifacts this time, so they finished very late. Chu Luyue paused. How many? She remembered that Tang Ku and Su Li had said that they would give all the divine artifacts they refined to her. Cini said. The two of them refined 42 divine artifacts each, for a total of 84. Chu Liuyue's eyes widened. How many did you say? Xin Yi's expression was as calm as ever. A total of 84 divine artifacts, and all of them are venerable divine artifacts. The two of you have already handed them over to this subordinate, and I'm just waiting for you to come back. As he spoke, he took out 2 yin and yang rings. These 2 yin and yang rings looked a bit different, and each had a small seal mark on it. The one on the left is Senior Tang Ku's, and the one on the right is Sir Su's. Xin Yi respectfully presented them with both hands. The two of them said that you must personally examine them and choose one that you like. Chu Luyue. I remember that they used the same materials. Then these, as you think, these are the same. This subordinate has observed the entire process, and the two of them are indeed equally matched. Chu Luyue was speechless. She put away the 2 cosmos rings and checked them separately. Sure enough, both the quantity and the type were exactly the same. How were they to compete? Chu Luyue looked at the 2 small cosmic rings in a daze. 84. Back then, how many of yang, how many lives, heaven? Now that the two of them were working together, they were able to refine so many in one go. It was truly terrifying. Recently, many families and clans in the world of divine ruins heard the news and sent letters to buy these divine artifacts. I didn't dare to act rashly, so I sent them to your study and waited for you to come back and personally review them. Chu Luyue raised her eyebrows. They're quite fast. The news of Tang Ku and Xin Yi staying in Peach Blossom Dock had long spread, and the news of the two of them starting to refine artifacts together had spread like wildfire from the beginning. Who wouldn't be jealous of nearly 100 venerable divine artifacts? Who wouldn't be envious? All of a sudden, all the families and clans heard the news, hoping to trade for some from Peach Blossom Dock. King divine artifacts were already precious enough, let alone venerable divine artifacts. There were very few families like Family Yi and the Nan family. There's no need to read them. Reject all the letters. Chu Luyue continued to walk in. On one hand, it was the goodwill of the two seniors, so it wasn't convenient to give it away. On the other hand, it was because of the illusory god palace. Thinking of this, her expression froze. By the way, after we left, did anything unusual happen in the world of divine ruins? Xin Yi nodded. Yes. The illusion god palace's heaven gate is about to open, and everyone in the world of divine ruins has already started to prepare. Chu Liuyue's heart skipped a beat. Everyone already knows. Xin Yi recounted the scene that day to her. At this point, all the cultivators in the world of divine ruins have already heard the news. Moreover, there's a rumor that as long as one can enter the illusion god palace, they can break through to the supreme god level. So, everyone is ready to make a move. Chu Liuyue's heart suddenly sank. But did you find out who released the news? Xin Yi shook his head. Someone is secretly adding fuel to the fire, purposely stirring up this pool of water. It's already impossible to trace the source of the news. Chu Luyue pursed her lips. If that was the case, the world of divine ruins would be in chaos. But they don't know where the illusion god palace is. Even if they know, what can they do? Xin Yi frowned, and a complicated expression flashed across his eyes. An ominous feeling rose in Chu Luyue's heart. Xin Yi said. The bridge to the illusion god palace has been built. Chu Luyue was shocked. What did you say? Xin Yi said. When night comes, you'll know what I mean. The waiting time was always unbearable. Chu Luyue stood in the courtyard, staring at the sky. It was already evening, and there was still some time before the sky turned dark. She kept thinking about everything that had happened before, and vaguely felt like there was an invisible net covering her. It was like fate, and she couldn't break free. Night fell bit by bit. When the first stars shone in the black velvet-like night sky, the bridge finally appeared. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2180. In the thick night sky, a silver-arched bridge stretched across the sky. One end of the bridge connected to the distant horizon, while the other end extended into the sky, into the clouds, and connected to an unknown place. Grand, brilliant, gorgeous, and noble. Specks of light gathered together, forming a silver bridge that seemed to have substance. But upon closer inspection, those specks of light did not seem to be simple specks of light, but seemed to be engraved with some kind of pattern. But because it was too far away, it was impossible to see clearly for the time being. That bridge has appeared since the night that those words flickered in the sky of the divine ruins world. Chu Luiyue recalled Xin Yi's words, and countless thoughts flashed through his mind. In the beginning, it was just a ball of gathered light, born at the point where heaven and earth met. It was difficult to reach, and it did not sleep at all. But gradually, those rays of light spread out towards the sky, little by little forming the shape of a bridge. Until now, that bridge still appears every night and continues to extend. No one knows what it is, but everyone is certain that the end of the bridge must be the legendary illusory god palace. The day the bridge is completely grafted is the day the heaven gate opens. Chu Luiyue stared at the bridge in the sky, and after a long time, he exhaled softly. Xin Yi's guess should be the guess of all the cultivators in the divine ruins world. Such a strange and beautiful scene was unfamiliar and novel to them. Humans were always curious about the unknown with fear. Even if they knew it was dangerous, they would still want to try it for themselves. This time was no exception. Moreover, behind that bridge was very likely to be a huge opportunity. Who wouldn't be tempted? Back then, when the new gate realm opened, it attracted so many people to go there, not to mention the current situation. Still looking at this? Rongxiu walked out of the room and put a coat on Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue gathered his clothes, and after a moment of silence, he asked, "Do you think that the place connected to is really the legendary illusory god palace?" If that was the case, then De Bao and the rest were there as well. Rongxiu held her hand. Perhaps it was because of the cold night wind, but her fingertips were also cold. Rongxiu wrapped her hand in his palm and sensed that her body was gradually warming up before he said, "Don't worry. No one can say for sure. We'll only know when we get there." That's true. Chu Luiyue turned to look at him. That pair of serene and deep phoenix eyes were calm and tranquil, reflecting two tiny figures of her. He whispered, "What are you thinking about?" His voice was low and gentle as usual. Chu Luiyue hesitated for a moment. "Rongxiu, I feel like there's a hand pushing me over." Although she didn't know who was behind this, there was indeed an invisible hand that was slowly pushing her in this direction. The illusory god palace definitely had some sort of connection with her. But she didn't know why, but she didn't have any memories related to it. Rongxiu lowered his head and kissed her forehead. Don't be afraid. No matter where you go, I'll be with you. No matter the distance, life or death." Chu Luiyue's uneasy heart instantly calmed down. She raised her head slightly and kissed him. Before he could react, she rested her head on his shoulder and rubbed it gently. "I'm not afraid. I have you." "What?" You invited Grandpa Maojin over." In another courtyard, Dumpling and Ziqin were sitting face to face around a stone table. There were many fresh and juicy berries on the table. These were all specially selected by Sanson. Each and every one of them was a rare heavenly treasure. They were extremely effective in replenishing energy and healing injuries. They were originally for Ziqin, but now they were all dumplings. At this moment, Dumpling was gnawing on a red fruit that was bigger than her fist. Hearing Zichen's words, she suddenly stopped and raised her head in shock and confusion. Yes. They should be here tomorrow. Zichen said and glanced at her. Her little mouth was stained with red juice and a few white sesame seeds. A pair of black grape-like eyes blinked, full of confusion. Raise your face. Zichen said. What? Dumpling asked curiously, but she still raised her face obediently. Zichen reached over and wiped the white sesame seeds off the corner of her mouth. No one is fighting with you. Just eat slowly. Zichen withdrew his hand and said lightly. Dumpling realized that she was eating too happily and didn't know when she had eaten so much. She wiped her mouth and her hand was suddenly stained red. It was rare for her to feel a little embarrassed. I don't know why, but recently I've been hungry. She looked at the fruit in her hand hesitantly and then looked at the half-empty plate on the table. It was all hers. It seemed that she had eaten a little too much. Zichen withdrew his gaze and his handsome face was expressionless. Don't waste it. Oh. Dumpling heard this and felt a lot more at ease. She muttered as she ate. Grandpa Patriarch also sent me a message saying that they will be here in 2 days. Strange, didn't they just go back not long ago? Why are they coming again? Although she was young, she had followed Chu Luiyue to these two ancient mythological beast clans several times. Under normal circumstances, Mao Zhen and Yi Zhao would never appear at the same time. For so long, it had only happened twice. The first time was because of Rong Xiu and Chu Liuyue's wedding. The second time was because of her and Zichen's accident. But this time, is it because of that bridge? Dumpling raised her head and looked at the bridge in the sky. Zichen narrowed his eyes. Probably. I don't know how that bridge appeared. Dumpling pouted and stuffed the last bit of fruit into her mouth. I feel a little uncomfortable when I see it. Zichen frowned and looked at her. Uncomfortable? What's the matter? Dumpling shook her head. Her small mouth was full and her words were a little unclear. She raised her small hand and pointed at the bridge. I don't know. Anyway, it's just, Zichen reached out and pulled her hand over. He put 2 fingers together and placed them on her wrist. He separated a part of his power and probed into her body. After a round of examination, he did not find anything unusual. Because she had opened her 6th meridian, Dumpling's body was much better than before. Her power was also more abundant than before. If she were to say that she was uncomfortable, there was no reason for it. Dumpling looked at his serious face and immediately smiled. I'm fine. Don't worry, I'm very healthy. Maybe I ate too much. Zichen did not comment on her statement, but he did not continue to ask. Alright, since you're done eating, I'll go first. Dumpling clapped her hands and jumped down from the stool. Zichen raised his eyebrows slightly. Go. Where to? Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2181. Dumpling said in a crisp voice, Of course I'm going back to sleep. Zichen paused. Isn't there a place for you to sleep here? During this period, Dumpling had been sleeping in the same room as him. Dumpling blinked. But your injury has already healed. Zichen's injury had indeed healed very quickly. He had even removed all the gauze during the day. She walked over and held Zichen's hand, revealing his smooth wrist. She nodded. Look. It's all healed. Other than the skin color around the wound that looked a little different from the other parts, it had basically completely recovered. Zichen felt that his wrist was a little itchy. He quietly withdrew his hand and thought for a moment, as if he was deliberating. I thought it would be a while before Master came back, so, Dumpling was very clingy. Most of the time, she was clingy to Chu Luiyue, but this time, she and Rongxiu did not bring the two of them with them when they left. He thought that Dumpling would not be willing to sleep on her own after her injury healed today, so he specially tidied up the room next door. But unexpectedly, you can go back if you want. Although she might be a little tired from this trip, she should be fine with the holy sun around. As Zichen spoke, he stood up and was about to go back to the room. Dumpling, however, instantly felt a little conflicted. Ah! That's right. Rongxiu was also there. She jogged a few steps and caught up with Zichen. She looked up and she raised her head and asked, Zichen, do you think it's inappropriate for me to go back now? It was not that she had a high level of self-awareness, but that she had learned her lesson too many times. She did not want to be thrown out by someone again. Zichen stopped in his tracks and looked at the sky with a calm expression. It's fine. Although it's a little late, she has always doted on you the most. It's fine. Hearing what he said, Dumpling felt even more unsuitable. Ah, then I can't go back even more. I'd better sleep here. After saying that, she ran in with her small feet. Zichen. Can I sleep on the bed tonight? Dumpling turned around and stuck out her round head. Zichen nodded slightly. Yes. The next day, Maozhen arrived at the Peach Blossom Cove. Without stopping to rest, he directly entered the Yu residence. When he passed through the barrier, Chu Luiyue already knew that he was coming and specially came out to welcome him. Senior Maozhen. Chu Luiyue stepped forward. Sorry to trouble you to come again. Maozhen waved his hand. His expression was no longer as relaxed as before, and there was a hint of seriousness between his brows. Let's talk inside. In the hall, Chu Luiyue and Maozhen sat facing each other. Where's Rongxiu? After taking a seat, Maozhen looked around and did not see Rongxiu. He could not help but feel a little strange. Chu Luiyue said, Yuemo just rushed back from the Yuntian Tower. He said that he had something to report, so I came over first. Maozhen nodded and said, it's fine. He's wholeheartedly loyal to you. It's the same for him to talk to you. Chu Luiyue nodded with an apologetic look on his face. Actually, we should be the ones paying a visit this time, that's fine. In fact, even if I didn't hear from you this time, I was planning to come over. Maozhen's expression was rarely serious. This made Chu Luiyue tense up as well. I heard that Nan Suhui was here. Did you guys go to Lingxiao College? Chu Luiyue shook his head and briefly explained the matter. He included the disappearance of Debao and the others. It was just a few words, but it made Maozhen's expression even more serious. So, those people are no longer in the Red Moon Desert, but in the Illusory God Palace. He had already guessed it before, but Chu Luiyue didn't say anything, so he didn't ask too much. Now it seemed that those people's identities were indeed extraordinary. However, now wasn't the time to think about this. Whether it's true or not, we have to go to the Illusory God Palace to take a look, Chu Luiyue said. Maozhen sighed. The heaven gate of the Illusory God Palace is about to open. The entire Divine Ruins world is restless. However, this trip is too dangerous, so I'm here to tell you. Don't be impatient. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. Senior Maozhen. You seem to know something about the Illusory God Palace. Maozhen smiled bitterly. Not really, but we have some connections. The ancestor of the great Phoenix dragon race died in the Illusory God Palace. Chu Luiyue didn't expect him to say such words. He was shocked. This doesn't seem to be the case, you said it yourself. Those are all rumors. Maozhen patted the armrest of the chair and sighed. Actually, only the great Phoenix dragon race's clan leader knows about this. This matter is of great importance and is extremely confidential. If the heaven gate of the illusory god palace wasn't about to open, I wouldn't have revealed this matter. Chu Luiyue thought of the coiling dragon pillar in the Great Void Temple. Even though there was only a trace of the great phoenix dragon ancestor's aura left in it, it was still powerful and awe-inspiring. From this, one could see how powerful that person was when he was at his peak. It was rumored that he died naturally. Who knew that? It was related to the illusory god palace. In fact, it's not just the great phoenix dragon race. Mao Zhen looked at Chu Luiyue with a complicated expression. The one from the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan is the same. Even. He suddenly paused as if he thought of something and frowned. The hall was silent. Chu Luiyue was a little stunned. Even what? From Mao Zhen's words, could it be that the ancestor of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan had an even more? Why isn't Yi Zhao here? Mao Zhen suddenly asked. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2182. Chu Luiyue felt a little strange. Senior Yi Zhao should be here soon, right? Have you sent him the news? Mao Zhen asked. Chu Luiyue nodded in confusion. Of course. I sent the news to both of you at the same time. Peach Blossom Cove was quite far from Phoenix God Mountain and Divine Dragon Island. However, this wasn't a problem for Yi Zhao and Mao Zhen. With their speed, they would arrive in less than a day. However, Mao Zhen was faster than expected. As for Yi Zhao, it didn't seem to matter if he was a little late. Why did Mao Zhen look a little worried? Senior Yi Zhao followed me back to Peach Blossom Cove and just left not long ago. I think he will be a little late this time, right? Mao Zhen gradually frowned. No, he knows the importance of this matter. Logically speaking, he should be here before me. Why isn't he here yet? He looked outside, but there was no movement at all. Chu Luiyue gradually felt a little uneasy. Mao Zhen was a forthright person. If he hadn't really encountered something troublesome, he definitely wouldn't have such a reaction. And his worry for Yi Zhao didn't seem to be without reason. Wait a little longer. Perhaps he will be here soon. Chu Luiyue said. Senior Mao Zhen, you said that we shouldn't rush to the illusory god palace. Is it because something happened to the great Phoenix Dragon clan's ancestor there? Mao Zhen nodded and then shook his head. Sort of, but not completely. There are some things that I can't explain to you clearly now. Since Yi Zhao is here, you will know after listening. At this moment, Zhen Yi suddenly came in from outside in a hurry. Chu Luiyue saw that his expression was a little abnormal, and his heart skipped a beat. Master, something happened to the meteor sect. Zhen Yi walked in and handed over a black feather with both hands. Chu Luiyue immediately stood up and walked over. He took the black feather in his hand. It was still stained with blood. Chu Luiyue was very familiar with this aura. This is the feather of the legendary three-eyed eagle that Shi Rui contracted. Her brows were tightly knitted together. Zhen Yi explained, just now, someone brought this feather over, but before I could ask about it, that person had already breathed his last. This subordinate recognizes him. He is one of the elders who accompanied Shi Rui to the Red Moon Desert. Chu Luiyue immediately asked, where is he? Zhen Yi shook his head. He was poisoned. Half an hour after his death, he turned into a pool of blood. What a vicious method. Did you find out what kind of poison it was? Little Hachi has already gone there, but whether or not we can find out is still unknown. Did that person leave any message? Not at all. When he came, he was already mute. Chu Luiyue's heart trembled. What kind of person would do such a vicious thing to the Flying Star sect? Moreover, this method was truly powerful. No matter what, the Flying Star sect was still a first-rate family in the Divine Ruins world. According to Chu Liuyue's understanding, they did not have any deep grudges with anyone. Logically speaking, it was impossible for them to attract such a disaster. Those who had gone to the Red Moon Desert with Shi Rui were basically all venerable god experts. What kind of power could force them into such a miserable state? Chu Liyue kept the feather. Let's go to Little Hachi. She had just taken half a step when she turned back to look at Mao Zhen with some hesitation. Mao Zhen immediately said, I'll go with you. Chu Liuyue's group quickly arrived at the city gate. At this moment, Little Hachi was standing there with her arms crossed. She was carefully staring at a pool of dark red blood on the ground. Little Hachi. Chu Liyue quickly went up to her. When Little Hachi heard the voice, she raised her head and looked over. However, at this moment, her delicate and beautiful face was dyed with a trace of worry. Chu Liyue walked closer and looked at the ground. The pool of blood had already dried up. All that was left was a patch of dark red blood and a faint stench. But did you notice something? Little Hachi shook her head in defeat. No. She was good at these things and had seen all kinds of strange poisons. However, she really could not recognize it this time. Chu Liyue bent down to take a look. This smell was somewhat familiar. She seemed to have smelled it somewhere before. However, she could not recall where she had smelled it before. Chu Liyue frowned slightly. You residents. Dumpling was still sleeping on the bed. Zichen had already woken up early in the morning. When he saw Dumpling kicking the blanket away restlessly, he got up and walked over to her. Just as he covered her with the blanket, she turned over and kicked it away. Her foot almost landed on Zichen's face. His face darkened. He grabbed her little white foot and stuffed it under the blanket. However, Dumpling began to struggle uneasily again. Zichen was about to speak when he suddenly saw Dumpling frowning. There seemed to be tears at the corners of her eyes. There was panic in her eyes. Was she having a nightmare? He paused and gently patted Dumpling's face. Dumpling, wake up. Dumpling. Dumpling seemed to have fallen into a deep nightmare. Instinctively, she hugged his hand tightly. Tears kept rolling down from the corners of her eyes. Crystal-clear teardrops fell on the pillow, quickly wetting the pillow. Zichen furrowed his brows, feeling a bit worried. He helped her wipe away her tears. Dumpling suddenly woke up. Grandpa clan leader. She sat up abruptly and looked at Zichen. Her eyes were full of panic. Zichen. Bad news. Grandpa Patriarch is in trouble. Zichen hugged her and patted her back. It's nothing. You just had a nightmare. Dumpling shook her head. No. It's real. It's real. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2183. Where's Ayu? I'm going to find Ayu. Dumpling was crying hard. Zichen's expression gradually became serious as he looked at her. He carried Dumpling in his arms and comforted her as he walked outside. Dumpling, don't cry. I'll take you to her. Dumpling hugged his neck and leaned over his shoulder. She nodded while sobbing. Her little body was still sobbing. Zichen's brows were tightly furrowed as he quickly walked outside. At first, he also thought that Dumpling was having a nightmare, but looking at her behavior, it really didn't seem like it. Could it be that something really happened? Zichen carried Dumpling and soon arrived at the city gate. Chu Liyue seemed to sense something and turned around, just in time to see the two of them. What's wrong with you, Dumpling, what's wrong? Seeing Dumpling's red eyes, Chu Liyue's heart immediately ached. Ah, you. Dumpling opened her arms, and Chu Liyue took her into his arms and comforted her. What's wrong? What happened? Chu Luiyue kissed Dumpling gently on the face. Dumpling, don't be afraid. Ah, you is here. She looked at Ziqin as she asked. Ziqin shook his head. In fact, he wasn't sure what exactly happened. Dumpling's eyes were watery. Ah, something happened to Grandpa Clan Leader. Chu Luiyue was shocked. Something happened. What do you mean? Dumpling said. I was sleeping just now when I suddenly felt uncomfortable. After I woke up, I found that the aura that Grandpa Clan Leader left in my body was gone. And I can't sense the barrier of Phoenix God Mountain. As Dumpling spoke, sparkling and hot tears kept falling. Boo-hoo, she lay in Chu Luiyue's arms and sobbed. Chu Luiyue's heart sank. Ever since Dumpling went missing last time, Yi Zhao was afraid that something would happen to her again, so he paid extra attention to this aspect. That aura would not dissipate for no reason. In addition, the most important thing was that Tuanzi couldn't sense the enchantment of the divine Phoenix Mountain. As the young mistress of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, Dumpling, who possessed the purest bloodline, had absolute control over that barrier. Dumpling, be good. Don't cry. Don't be afraid. Why don't you try again and see if you really can't contact him? Chu Luiyue comforted. Dumpling held back her tears and shook her head. Seeing her like this, Chu Luiyue knew that the situation must be bad. I knew something was wrong when Yi Zhao didn't show up after so long. Mao Zhen's expression was grave. I'm afraid something has happened to Phoenix God Mountain. Chu Luiyue pursed his lips tightly. Phoenix God Mountain was the territory of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Hundreds of Crimson Gold Sky Phoenixes lived there. What exactly happened that made it so difficult for them to resist? We must go to Phoenix God Mountain as soon as possible. Chu Luiyue said. Master, about the meteor sect, Little Hachi said hesitantly. Problems had arisen in both places, but they could only choose one place to go now. Chu Luiyue knitted his brows. At this moment, Rong Xiu's voice was heard. I will personally lead some people to the meteor sect. Chu Luiyue turned around and saw Rong Xiu walking toward them. You will personally go. Rong Xiu nodded. The meteor sect is a first-rate aristocratic family. The problem that forced them to this step is definitely not simple. I have already passed down the order. Yuntian Tower will also send some people to go with you. Chu Luiyue felt a little relieved. She handed over the black feather. This is the only clue left behind by the meteor sect's people. Rong Xiu received the black feather. He then looked at Mao Zhen and cupped his hands in greeting. His expression was serious. Rong Xiu has a presumptuous request. I hope that Senior Mao Zhen will agree to it. Mao Zhen seemed to have guessed what he wanted to say. She said, You want me to go with you to the Phoenix God Mountain? Rong Xiu nodded. I know that this matter is a little difficult for you. But don't worry. I will go even if you don't ask. Mao Zhen heaved a long sigh. Her eyebrows also became serious. The relationship between the two ancient mythological beast clans was subtle. However, the other party couldn't stay out of trouble at a critical moment. Rong Xiu felt a little relieved. He walked over and embraced Chu Luiyue. Then, he kissed her forehead. Be careful. Chu Luiyue raised her eyes and looked at him. She nodded lightly. You too. Chu Luiyue and the group quickly ran toward the Phoenix God Mountain. After a period of running, they finally arrived at the sea. Standing on the shore and looking at the sea in the distance, they could vaguely see the undulating mountain peaks. But for some reason, Chu Luiyue felt that something seemed to have changed when she came here previously. The defense here has all disappeared. Just as she was lost in thought, Mao Zhen's words instantly woke her up. That's right. Starting from this sea, all the areas that extended toward the Phoenix God Mountain were actually under the jurisdiction of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. In the past, when they came here, they would feel a strong divine pressure even if they were just standing here. But now, there was nothing. Mao Zhen said in a low voice, I didn't restrain my aura. Logically, the Phoenix God Mountain should have sensed it. Someone would immediately come out and stop me. But now, a deathly silence ensued. Between heaven and earth, there was only the sound of the wind blowing across the sea. The sound of waves hitting the reefs echoed continuously. Chu Luiyue felt increasingly uneasy. Dumpling, let's go and take a look. Dumpling nodded with reddened eyes. Then, she waved her hand. Above the sea, a reddish-gold ice bridge quickly formed. Passing through the ice bridge, they quickly arrived in front of the Phoenix God Mountain's barrier. Until now, as the clan leader of the Great Phoenix Dragon Clan, Mao Zhen still did not feel any obstruction. This was enough to explain the problem. Ever since these two divine beast clans were born in ancient times, such a situation had never happened. Dumpling could not care less. She rushed forward and was about to open the barrier. However, that layer of translucent barrier seemed to be frozen and did not move at all. Dumpling suddenly widened her eyes. How can this be? Chu Luiyue's heart sank. Because of the purest bloodline, it was always easy for Tuanzi to control the boundary. She could open and close it whenever she wanted. This was the first time such a situation had happened. She walked forward and covered the barrier with her hand. It was cold to the touch. Soon, a layer of silver frost began to rapidly condense under her palm. Chu Luiyue's heart jumped and she immediately retracted her hand. However, there was already a palm-sized frost mark on the barrier. Looking at the layer of frost, Chu Luiyue's temples suddenly twitched. This was, bang. Before she could figure it out, Tuanzi had already kicked at the boundary. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2184. Bang! A muffled sound could be heard. However, there were no cracks on the barrier other than the rapidly condensing frost. This barrier was extremely sturdy. Even Dumpling's full-powered attack could not break it. Chu Luiyue looked at Mao Zhen. Senior Mao Zhen, do you have any ideas? Mao Zhen shook his head. This barrier is condensed with the bloodline power of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Once I make a move, the situation will only become more troublesome. After all, he was the clan leader of the Great Phoenix Dragon Clan. Chu Luiyue slowly clenched her fists. In that case, it will be extremely difficult to break this barrier. At this moment, a reddish-gold stream of light suddenly flew out from between Dumpling's brows. It was a long feather. Ancestor's golden feather. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. Dumpling, why did you summon it? Under normal circumstances, this ancestor's golden feather would only appear when Dumpling opened her meridians. Chu Luiyue could not be blamed for being too nervous. It was because the previous incident had left a deep impression on her. Every time she thought of Dumpling's hands bound by iron chains and covered in blood, her heart trembled faintly. Dumpling shook her head blankly. It's not me. The ancestor's golden feather slowly floated forward and landed lightly on the barrier. In an instant, a shocking and vast pressure spread out from within. The frozen enchantment instantly melted. An entrance quickly appeared in front of them. It was the ancestor's golden feather that flew out and opened this barrier. Then, the ancestor's golden feather flew into the barrier, and Dumpling immediately followed. Chu Luiyue and the others followed closely behind and entered the Phoenix God Mountain. The moment they entered, a thick smell of blood drifted out from the air. Chu Luiyue knew that something was wrong and immediately looked up. She was instantly stunned by what she saw. As far as the eye could see, the mountain peak had collapsed, the forest had collapsed, and there were messy bloodstains everywhere. It was clear that they had just gone through an extremely bitter battle. Chu Liuyue's heart tightened as he looked at Dumpling. Dumpling bit her lips tightly and headed straight for the Phoenix Shrine. A bottomless pit appeared in the plaza in front of the Phoenix Shrine. Rocks tumbled down and dust scattered in all directions. The thick smell of blood drifted out from this place. The dark red, dried bloodstains were evidence of everything that had happened here. Grandpa Chief. Dumpling suddenly choked with sobs and shouted, throwing herself into a pile of rocks. She lifted the rocks and pulled out a scarlet gold feather that was stained with blood from the bottom of the pile. Her face and hands were stained with dust and blood, but she couldn't care less about herself. She just held the feather in her hands and cried. Chu Liyue quickly rushed over. Dumpling. She held Dumpling in her arms and looked at the feather again. The aura on it indeed belonged to Yi Zhao. Chu Liyue's lips were tightly pursed. Yi Zhao was the chief of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. His strength was extremely tyrannical, and almost no one in the entire Divine Ruins could be his match. Who was it that hurt him? And who destroyed this place to this extent? She took a few steps forward and came to the edge of the deep pit. She looked down. A familiar gloomy aura surged up from below. Chu Liyue's heart suddenly felt like it was being tightly clenched by something. This aura, it was exactly the same as the hand at the bottom of Lingxiao College's Mountain of Wine and the eye in the Red Moon Desert. An extremely preposterous guess appeared in Chu Liyue's mind. Perhaps, a part of that person's incomplete divine body was also hidden here. She held her breath. Who would have thought that such a shocking secret was actually hidden under the plaza in front of the Phoenix Shrine? She suddenly turned around and looked at the Phoenix Shrine. Fortunately, the Phoenix Shrine was enveloped by a layer of barrier, and it did not seem to have suffered any damage. Grand, majestic, and solemn. As always. Chu Liyue carried Dumpling and turned to leave. Maozhen hurriedly asked, where are you going? Chu Liyue said firmly. Fenghuang Valley. Fenghuang Valley was not far from the Phoenix Shrine, and they quickly arrived. A gigantic barrier enveloped the entire area. And within it, one could vaguely see balls of light. Chu Liyue was very familiar with this. When the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clansmen rested here, they would all enter their own balls of light. When she and Dumpling first came here, it was also like this. But at that time, there were not so many balls of light. But now, as far as the eye could see, there were at least 100. Dumpling looked at the scene in front of her in a daze. At this time, her tears were almost all gone. Are the remaining members of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan all here? Chu Liyue muttered softly. Dumpling clenched the two feathers in her hands. One was the ancestor's golden feather, and the other was Yi Zhao's feather. Hearing Chu Liyue's words, Dumpling turned to look at her. They seem to have fallen asleep. Fallen asleep? Yes. Yes, they have fallen asleep. Dumpling used the back of her hand to rub the corners of her eyes. Her voice was still choked with sobs, but it was obvious that she was holding it in. Grandpa clan leader made them fall asleep. Chu Liyue's brows twitched slightly as she looked at the huge barrier that enveloped the entire Fenghuang Valley. If that's the case, then this barrier was also left behind by Senior Yi Zhao. Tuanzi nodded hard and said, there were also a few grandpa elders who seemed to have helped. There were also a few other people's auras mixed in. Chu Liyue was even more certain of her conjecture. It seemed that something had happened to the Divine Phoenix Mountain. Yi Zhao had used all his strength to protect the Divine Phoenix Hall in Fenghuang Valley, but he had disappeared with the thing buried under the plaza. Chu Liyue was certain that Yi Zhao was still alive. Because if Yi Zhao died, Dumpling would automatically inherit the position of clan leader. The Divine Phoenix Hall would definitely sense it. But now, such a situation had not occurred. However, it would be extremely difficult to find Yi Zhao now. The barrier outside the Divine Phoenix Mountain should have been personally created by Senior Yi Zhao. This was the only way to protect the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Dumpling, can you detect where Senior Yi Zhao went? Chu Luiyue asked. Dumpling shook her head. Suddenly, she seemed to have thought of something and looked up hesitantly. At this moment, the sky was gradually darkening. A silver bridge gradually appeared at the point where the sky met the earth. It extended upwards bit by bit, and was clearly longer than yesterday. Dumpling stared at the bridge. That feeling was getting stronger. Grandpa clan leader, is there? Chu Luiyue frowned. Could it be that Yi Zhao was also in the illusory god palace? On the other side, Rong Xiao was leading Umo and the rest towards the meteor sect. Before they arrived, they saw a ball of fire from afar. The fire that covered the sky seemed to have swallowed everything. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2185. The meteor sect was a first-rate aristocratic family in the Divine Ruins world. It had been passed down for thousands of years. It had a deep foundation and a huge influence. However, at this moment, the crazily burning sea of fire easily swallowed everything. Rong Xiao's sword-like eyebrows knitted together. At this moment, a group of black-armored soldiers flew over from the direction of the sea of fire. The totem of the Yuntian Tower was engraved on their collars. These people were Rong Xiao's Black Knights. Your Highness. Hundreds of soldiers saluted in unison. Rong Xiao asked, where are they? Your Highness, I rushed over immediately after receiving your order. However, I was still a step too late. When I arrived here, the fire had already started. Most of the people of the meteor sect had already died. Only 157 people survived. Now, I have arranged for them to stay 100 miles to the southwest. How are the head of the Shi clan and Shi Ruier? The head of the Shi clan had already perished in order to protect his clansmen. The second miss of the Shi clan is fine now. She is just grieving and unwilling to speak. It would be hard for anyone to accept such a thing. Rong Xiao nodded. I will go and take a look. You don't have to follow me. The soldiers felt strange. However, they had always respected Rong Xiao's orders. Therefore, they didn't ask or dissuade him. They respectfully complied and waited in place. Although it was dangerous, His Highness's strength was unfathomable. Therefore, they didn't need to worry. Rong Xiao moved and arrived in the sky above the blazing fire. The houses had already been engulfed by the sea of fire. Only their vague outlines were left. The scorching heat caused the temperature of the surrounding air to rise by a lot. Even a river not far away was on the verge of drying up. Every inch of space was suffering from the terrifying heat. It was almost distorted. Rong Xiao looked down. A huge mirror slowly emerged from the endless flames. The flames danced crazily at the edges. However, they seemed to be afraid of the mirror. They didn't dare to approach it. Soon, a figure was reflected in the mirror. It was a face identical to Rong Xiao's. That person was dressed in a black robe and his gaze was deep and profound. Disdainful, cold, and noble. He looked at Rong Xiao and spoke slowly. You should go back. Patriarch, why don't you sit down and rest for a while? An old voice came from behind. Shi Rui shook his head and didn't say anything. He was still looking into the distance. This place was over 100 kilometers away, but they could still see the flames that soared into the sky. One could only imagine how bad the situation there had become. And they had just escaped from that hellish place. It used to be her home. Her father had already passed away, and she had accepted the order to officially inherit the position of the head of the family. Ever since she was young, she had always been groomed as the next patriarch. However, she had never imagined that she would stand in this position under such circumstances. Her eyes were red, but not a single tear fell from them. That fire had completely evaporated her tears. She didn't even have the strength to cry now. She was just standing there with the last of her willpower. The old man standing behind her felt sorry for her. After thinking for a while, he couldn't help but persuade her. "Patriarch, you have already done your best. If you hadn't sent that message for help, the people of the Yuntian Tower wouldn't have come. I'm afraid that now." Shi Rui was in a daze. Actually, she didn't have much hope at that time. After all, everything had happened too suddenly. The only thing she could think of at that time was to ask for help from the Peach Blossom Cove. Fortunately, the Yuntian Tower had come in time. Otherwise, the entire meteor sect would have been destroyed. At this moment, a tall figure was rapidly approaching from afar. It was Rongxiu. Several black-armored soldiers of the Yuntian Tower followed behind him. The people behind Shi Rui stood up one after another. "Saint." Shi Rui stepped forward and bowed solemnly. Her voice was choked with sobs. "Thank you for saving us, Saint." Rongxiu said, "Now that the meteor sect has been destroyed, you can't go back. They will escort you all the way back to the Peach Blossom Cove. You will stay there for the time being. You are Yu's friend. If she wants to save you, I will help you." Shi Rui took a deep breath. "The meteor sect will never be able to repay the kindness of the two of you." Rongxiu nodded. He turned around and was about to leave. Shi Rui was startled. She hastily asked, "Saint, aren't you going back to the Peach Blossom Cove with us?" Rongxiu didn't stop walking. "I have an important matter to take care of at the Yuntian Tower. I won't go back for the time being." Shi Rui was startled for a moment. Then, she nodded. Rongxiu was probably worried about the Yuntian Tower since such a thing had happened to the meteor sect. Therefore, it was normal for him to go back. Before she could say anything, Rongxiu had already left with Umo looking at the figure that quickly disappeared into the distance. Shi Rui felt an inexplicable sense of unease. At this moment, the bridge on the horizon had quietly appeared. Shi Rui slowly clenched her fists. Phoenix God Mountain. After confirming that most of her clansmen had only fallen into a deep sleep, Dumpling's heart finally calmed down a little. It was just that finding Yi Zhao next was a huge problem. "I wonder how Elder Yu and the others are doing now." Chu Luiyue looked at Dumpling as she thought of this. "Dumpling, are they still at the Phoenix God Mountain?" "Yes." Dumpling nodded. She pointed at the Phoenix God Palace. Elder Yu and the others seemed to be inside. But what? Tuanzi bit her hand and said uncertainly, "I'm sorry. There seems to be one person missing." Chu Liuyue's heart skipped a beat. "Who's missing?" "Great Elder Yi Gong." Chu Liuyue frowned. Yi Gong was already at odds with Dumpling. After Dumpling became the young master, Yi Gong suffered a huge blow and rarely came out. Why did he suddenly disappear now? In the dark and cramped cage, Lan Xiao was leaning against the wall with his legs crossed. His expression was still casual. "I say, you're really boring like this. We've already discussed it and even signed a contract. How can you tear it up unilaterally like this? You even locked yours truly and the others up. You don't really think that we'll listen to you just because you're locked up, do you?" He sneered and turned over. "It's been so long, and you still haven't given up. How childish." let me give you a piece of advice. I'm very hot-tempered. You can't control me. You'd better hurry up and let me out before I get angry. That low and hoarse voice finally sounded. You guys have already broken the contract by tempering your divine body without permission. If you really want to talk about punishment, you guys should be the first. Lan Xiao chuckled, sat up, and smiled evilly. Not only did I temper my divine body, but that Tianlei was also sent by you, Why? Are you envious? Let me remind you, what she sent over is a golden heavenly lightning. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2186. Smack. A black whip suddenly flew up and ruthlessly lashed Lan Zhao's face. Dark red blood stains quickly appeared on his handsome and exquisite face. It was a ghastly sight. Lan Xiao reached out and wiped his face with his thumb. When he saw the bloodstain, he cursed under his breath. Damn you! Do you know how precious my face is? He had waited for a full 10,000 years for this face to appear. If you continue to resist and struggle in vain, let alone your face, even your divine body will cease to exist. Lan Xiao sneered. Sure. Then why don't you kill me now? On account of our past friendship, if you give me a quick death, I might be grateful to you in the underworld. When you go to the underworld in the future, I might even make things easier for you. Forget it. It's better if you don't dirty my underworld. Disgusting. As he spoke, Lan Xiao lay down again and placed his hands behind his head. He looked like he was waiting for death. However, the voice disappeared and no longer paid any attention to him. After a long while, Lan Xiao scoffed. Of course, he didn't dare to kill him. He didn't dare to kill any of them. However, this kind of life was really not meant for humans. Force flickered in his palm and quickly brushed across his face. That wound healed quickly. He had a divine body, so it was naturally more convenient to deal with it. I'll remember this wound. He gritted his teeth and closed his eyes again. Phoenix God Mountain. Chu Luiyue was thinking about Yi Zhao when he suddenly heard Zichen's low and cold voice. Master, look over there. Chu Luiyue heard him and looked in the direction he was pointing. The night was dark. The bridge at the edge of the sky was still extending upwards. In the clouds where the bridge disappeared, there seemed to be a few silver flowing lights flashing. Then, more and more flowing lights surged out and intertwined with each other. They gathered together and gradually formed a huge silhouette. That's, Chu Luiyue squinted his eyes and looked carefully. Then, his pupils constricted. It was a door. It floated quietly in the air, majestic, powerful, and unapproachable. That's the Illusion God Palace's heavenly gate. Zichen suddenly realized something and asked in a deep voice. Chu Luiyue didn't say anything. The reason for that was because there were even more rays of light gathering behind the door, forming the outline of a magnificent city. Behind the clouds, the legendary Illusory God Palace was faintly discernible. Looks like the gate of heaven is really about to open. Once this commotion was made, it was unknown how many cultivators in the Divine Ruins world rushed over like ducks. Mao Zhen frowned. This was a huge temptation to all cultivators. Even if they knew that the road ahead was dangerous, they would still proceed without hesitation. What do you plan to do next? He looked at Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue hugged Dumpling tightly and said word by word, to the Illusory God Palace. Chu Luiyue and the others left the Divine Phoenix Mountain. Fortunately, Dumpling had the ancestor's golden feather, which made it convenient for them to enter and leave freely. After they left, they continued to freeze the barrier. Under such circumstances, this was undoubtedly the best choice. Everything that happened at the Divine Phoenix Mountain made Mao Zhen worried about Divine Dragon Island, so he didn't follow Chu Luiyue back to the Peach Blossom Cove. Instead, he returned to Divine Dragon Island. Chu Luiyue sped along. Along the way, he saw many cultivators heading straight for the bridge in the sky. The entire divine ruin seemed to be faintly restless. Chu Luiyue returned to the Peach Blossom Cove as quickly as possible. When he reached the city gate, he ran into Shi Rui and the others. Seeing Chu Luiyue, Shi Rui, who had been holding back for a long time, burst into tears again. However, she forced herself to hold it in, but her eyes were still filled with sadness. Chu Luiyue saw the sorry state of the group and guessed what had happened. She immediately walked over. "Greetings, Princess." The Black Knights bowed respectfully. Chu Luiyue nodded and motioned for them to rise. She looked around and realized that Rongxiu wasn't here. "Where's the Holy Sun?" she asked. The leader of the soldiers immediately said, "Princess, the Holy Sun has something important to attend to," so he returned to the Yuntian Tower. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Did he say when he would be back? His Highness said that he would need some time, but he didn't say when he would be back. Chu Luiyue felt a little strange. Rongxiu had rushed back. Did something really happen at the Yuntian Tower? However, she was afraid that the entire Divine Ruins world would be in chaos, and the Yuntian Tower wouldn't be spared either. She put away these thoughts and looked at Shi Rui. Rui, come with me." The remaining people of the Meteor sect were quickly settled down. Hundreds of Black Knights from the Yuntian Tower were also left behind at the Yu residence, and were responsible for guarding this place. Chu Luiyue brought Shi Rui back and asked her in detail. Unfortunately, Shi Rui didn't know what had happened. "I was cultivating at that time, but I suddenly heard the sound of fighting outside. I felt strange, so I went out to take a look. In the end, I saw that the people of the Meteor sect were killing each other. There weren't many people in the Meteor sect, and they had a good relationship with each other. They didn't have any life or death grudges. Therefore, I felt that something was wrong when I saw this. However, before I could catch those people and ask them about it, a big fire suddenly started in the ancestral hall. The fire spread very quickly, and the entire Meteor sect suffered disastrous casualties. We were only able to escape thanks to the Yuntian Tower's Black Knights. Otherwise, Shi Rui couldn't help but feel sorrowful as she recalled everything that had happened before. Chu Luiyue gently patted her hand, but he also knew that this kind of pain could not be comforted by others. She thought for a moment and frowned. Those people probably won't be able to find anything, but how did the fire start in the ancestral hall? Shi Rui shook her head. "I don't know. When I rushed over, the sea of fire had already engulfed the entire ancestral hall. I could only vaguely see that the flames seemed to be gushing out from the ground of the ancestral hall." Underground? Chu Luiyue's nerves suddenly tightened. Shi Rui nodded. Seeing her reaction, he couldn't help but be stunned. "What's wrong? Is there a problem?" Chu Luiyue took a deep breath. "I'm afraid there's a big problem." This situation was extremely similar to the situation at the Phoenix God Mountain. She pondered for a moment and said, "I plan to go to the Illusory God Palace." Shi Rui was shocked. "Now?" Chu Luiyue nodded and looked at the sky outside. At this moment, the sky was already bright. However, the bridge at the edge of the sky didn't disappear like before. The city had already disappeared, but the gate was still standing in the sky, shining brightly. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath. The Illusory God Palace's heavenly gate is about to open. It was waiting for her. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2187. Chu Luiyue called Cini over to discuss the matter of heading to the illusory god palace together. This subordinate will naturally go with master. Cini didn't seem surprised by Chu Luiyue's decision. Or rather, from the moment that line of words flashed in the sky, he had already been prepared for it. Peach Blossom Dock can't be left alone. You should stay. Chu Luiyue was halfway through when he saw Cini's expression. He swallowed the rest of his words. Forget it. Come with me. Yes. Who else does master plan to bring with him to the 13U sect? Chu Luiyue pondered seriously for a moment. Sanson will be in charge of watching over Peach Blossom Dock. Wu Yao and Yu Jiu will stay behind to watch over the Dao Gate realm. 13 is too young, so he will stay as well. Oh right, there's also Shifang. Let him continue to grow vegetables in the Yu residence. In that case, only Hua Shuangshuang and Little Hachi would go with him. Tang Ku and Sir Su's identities are special. I'm afraid it won't be convenient. It's more appropriate to invite Taizu. There were many experts in Peach Blossom Dock, but this trip was dangerous and there were too many uncertainties. Chu Luiyue had to be very careful. After all, from the situation with the Meteor Sect and Phoenix God Mountain, Peach Blossom Dock had to leave enough combat power to prevent any accidents. Cini lowered his eyes slightly. A dark light seemed to flash through his indifferent and narrow eyes. Then, he looked up and asked. Chang Wanzhou. Master, do you want to bring him along? Chu Luiyue was stunned. Little Zhou. Cini nodded. Although he's only a high god now, his strength is not bad and his potential is not small. This might be a rare opportunity for him. Chu Luiyue pondered for a moment. You're right. Then let's bring Little Zhou along. She had seen Little Zhou's combat power. Moreover, he had followed her for a long time. Most of the time, he naturally knew what to do without her saying anything. But, Cini, when did you become so close to Little Zhou? Chu Luiyue sized up Cini strangely. Based on her understanding of Cini, other than the 13th Yu, he wasn't interested in anything else. Now, he actually took the initiative to mention Xiao Zhou's name. This was extremely rare. Cini's lips twitched as he smiled faintly. He's master's man. If master can trust him, then so can I, as long as it was convenient for her master, nothing else mattered. This was indeed the answer Cini gave. Chu Luiyue put away those chaotic thoughts. All right, it's settled then. Go inform them. I'll go find Taizu. They set off at night. I'll go with you. Shi Ruier suddenly stood up. Chu Luiyue shook his head. You're injured and need to recuperate. Moreover, your status is different now. So, the entire Meteor sect still needs to rely on you. Shi Ruier's expression immediately changed when she heard this. She pursed her lips tightly. After a long time, she said, all right. I'll listen to you. If there's anything you need, I and the entire Meteor sect will definitely do it. Chu Luiyue patted her shoulder lightly before turning around and leaving. Soon, it was night time. That silver bridge was especially bright and resplendent in the night sky. As expected, the silhouette of that city appeared once again. Moreover, it was even clearer than the previous day. Before they set off, Chu Luiyue arrived at the Dao realm. Today, Yu Jiu was in charge of guarding this place. She already knew that Chu Luiyue and the rest were planning to head to the illusory god palace. Therefore, she felt strange when she saw her here. Master, why are you here? Chu Luiyue shook his head. It's nothing. I'm just worried that something might happen to this Dao realm, so I came to take a look. Yu Jiu hugged the wooden sword in her arms and smiled. Don't worry. During this period of time, this Tao realm has been very stable. Although it still can't be passed through, it's much better than before when the situation was getting worse. Chu Luiyue walked to the front of the barrier and stared at it. Above the Tao realm, the light flickered and remained calm. She stood there quietly, as if she was waiting for something. She was waiting for the scene from that day to appear again. However, after waiting for a long time, the scene she expected did not appear. That mirror did not appear above the Tao realm, nor did it reflect her figure. Master. Seeing that Chu Luiyue stood there for a long time without any reaction, Yu Jiu called out. Chu Luiyue came back to her senses. She felt a little regretful. I guess I won't be able to see it today, she exhaled softly and turned to leave. Guard it well. Yes. The night wind was cold. Under the starry sky, Chu Luiyue and the others rushed toward the bridge. Chu Luiyue originally wanted to go with Rongxiu, but Rongxiu had returned to the Yuntian Tower and did not know when he would return. She had Yan Qing pass the message and led the others there first. In fact, the same scene was playing out in the entire Divine Ruins world. Countless cultivators, with all kinds of thoughts, rushed toward the rumored illusory god palace. In the vast sky, there were no stars and no moon. Only the gradually revealed appearance of the huge city attracted everyone's attention. It seemed to have existed here since ancient times. It was incomparably noble and unmoving. And that bridge was the only existence that people could touch. Whether or not they could ascend to the heavens and enter when the heaven gate opened became everyone's hope. The bridge was very far away from them. Even though Chu Luiyue and the others traveled at full speed, it took them half a month to reach it. Looking from afar, it was a sea. The silver bridge grew from the sea and extended toward the sky, connecting with the magnificent city. Countless rays of light scattered down. It was brilliant. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2188. At this moment, countless cultivators had gathered on the shore. They all looked up with unconcealable eagerness and anticipation in their eyes. Chu Luiyue's arrival caused a commotion among the crowd. That person from Peach Blossom Dock is here. I heard that Senior Tang Ku and Mr. Su forged nearly 100 venerable divine artifacts together and gave them all to Peach Blossom Dock as gifts. I wonder what kind of scene that is. I've long heard of Sheng Guanyu's fame, but I didn't expect to meet her here. What's so strange about that? The Illusion God Palace's heaven gate is about to open, and countless cultivators are rushing here to enter. She's no exception. But isn't that person from Yuntian Tower always with her? Why isn't she here this time? Sheng Guanyu seems to be very confident in herself since she only brought so few people here. However, the Illusory God Palace isn't a place that just anyone can enter. Everyone was discussing. During this period of time, Chu Luiyue could be said to be extremely famous in the Divine Ruins world. Thus, everyone was inevitably filled with curiosity and probing about her. Chu Luiyue didn't care about the various gazes and voices around her. She focused her gaze in front of her. The bluish-black seawater was churning, and the waves kept crashing against the rocks, splashing water everywhere. What was different from other sea regions was that the seawater here contained an extremely abundant amount of energy. Even though they were just standing on the shore, they could still feel the pressure that was hard to ignore. There was nothing on the surface of the sea other than the silver bridge. There's no sign of life here at all. Sheng Guanjing frowned and said in a low voice. Other than them, this place seemed to be too quiet. Only the sound of the waves kept echoing in their ears. Chu Luiyue stared at the mysterious sea and said softly, "The seawater is too rich. The energy in the seawater is too abundant. Naturally, no living creatures will approach it." Master, what's the reason for that? Little Hachi blinked and came over curiously. Isn't it better for cultivation if there's more energy? Chu Liuyue's lips curled up. Generally speaking, that's true. However, the prerequisite was that the body had to be able to withstand the irrigation and erosion of these powers. If he couldn't control it, it would only do more harm than good. Previously, in the palace in the Red Moon Desert, such a problem had occurred. I see. Little Hachi nodded and rested her chin on her hand. However, this place is indeed very strange. There is so much heaven and earth energy here, but it doesn't spread outwards. It only fills this place. It's as if there's an invisible barrier that's sealing everything. Chu Liyue looked at the silver bridge thoughtfully. Right at this moment, the sound of a bell suddenly came from the sky. Boom! The distant and boundless sound of the bell reverberated throughout the world. Everyone's heart trembled. The gate of heaven is opening. Someone in the crowd shouted, but it was not difficult to hear the suppressed excitement in the voice. Do we have to cross that bridge? Then we'll have to cross this sea first and reach that bridge. This sea is a little strange. Won't it be dangerous? If it's dangerous, we'll just have to be careful. We can't possibly give up eating for fear of choking and just watch, right? Although they knew that the road ahead was dangerous, it could not erase the yearning in their hearts. This old man will go first. A black-robed elder stroked his beard and took the lead. Chu Liyue glanced at him. She did not recognize that elder, but from his aura, there was no doubt that he was a venerable god expert. At a time like this, a venerable god expert would indeed be more confident. Everyone focused their gazes on him. The black-robed elder came to the shore and waved his hand, setting up a crimson barrier around him. Then, with a tap of his foot, he quickly headed toward the silver bridge in the center of the sea. Wherever he passed, ripples would appear on the surface of the sea. Then, everyone saw that the elder's speed had clearly slowed down. The rich heaven and earth energy was like a swamp, slowing down his pace. The black-robed elder was shocked. He felt as if a mountain was pressing down on him, so heavy that he almost could not breathe. He quickly circulated the origin power in his body, barely keeping his body from falling. Even so, he was still slowed down by a lot. He was only halfway there, but the energy in his body was already exhausted at an alarming rate. When he finally arrived in front of the silver bridge, his forehead was already covered in sweat. Only when he stepped onto the silver bridge did he feel the pressure on his body instantly lessen. Phew, he let out a long breath and stood there for a long while before recovering. When he looked back, he still felt some lingering fear. If he had been a little later, he really might not have been able to hold on and would have fallen into the sea. He looked at the people standing on the shore and said with lingering fear, I'm afraid that only venerable gods can barely pass through this sea. Those below venerable gods should just give up. Everyone looked at each other when they heard that. Many of those who came here were venerable gods, but the proportion of high gods was definitely not small either. How could the high gods here be willing to give up just because of this? Is he just trying to fool us? We're just flying over this sea. How can he be so exaggerated? That's right. This distance isn't that far. Why is it that only venerable gods can pass through? Isn't that a little too exaggerated? But he doesn't look like he's lying. No matter what, we shouldn't believe anyone's words at a time like this, okay? For a moment, there were differing opinions. Rather than saying that they did not believe the black-robed elder, it was more accurate to say that they were unwilling to give up just like that. They had gone through so much trouble to get here. How could they just leave after listening to someone else's words? Seeing everyone's reaction, the black-robed elder felt stifled and waved his sleeves. That's all I have to say. Believe it or not, it's up to you. You're courting death. If anything happens later, don't blame me for not warning you. Many people hesitated for a while, but in the end, they still chose to go forward. If we go together, we might be able to support each other. Perhaps we can pass through smoothly. That makes sense. Then we'll just follow behind them. A few moments later, Chu Luiyue saw 3 people holding hands as they walked forward. Of these 3, one was a venerable god while the other 2 were high gods. All of them looked rather young. It was no wonder they were so arrogant. The 3 of them walked forward smugly, but they soon realized how serious the situation was. Layers upon layers of pressure were surging in from all sides, almost crushing them. The energy in their bodies was rapidly being consumed, but even so, they found it difficult to move forward. When they were 1/3 of the way through, one of them couldn't hold on any longer and fell into the sea. Splash! Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2189. That person fell into the water and disappeared into the sea. The 2 people above looked down and were about to try to retrieve that person when suddenly, their eyes widened in shock. The body of the person who had just fallen had already been minced into pieces by the astonishing power in the sea. A smear of blood slowly spread, and the thick smell of blood rushed into their nostrils. The remaining pieces of flesh and blood rushed to the surface of the sea and were quickly drowned by the waves. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. From beginning to end, that person did not even have time to call for help before he was completely swallowed and died. Seeing this scene, everyone felt a chill run down their backs. This sea, plop. Another person could not hold on and fell. This time, only the god was left in the group of 3 in the blink of an eye. However, his current situation was not optimistic. The 2 people beside him fell one after another and died in front of his eyes, which was a huge blow to him. He was dazed for a moment, took a deep breath, and coughed because of the thick smell of blood. This finally made him come back to his senses, and he quickly fled without thinking. He ran madly in the direction of the Silver Bridge. The origin power in his body burned wildly, and his face was pale and his whole body was in pain. However, he could not care about anything else at this time. He only knew that he could rush forward as fast as he could. Finally, before he ran out of energy, he arrived at the Silver Bridge. As soon as he stepped on it, his body went weak and he staggered, almost falling to the ground. The black-robed elder who came first saw this and frowned. "Now, you still don't believe this old man's words?" Everyone fell silent. They had all seen the tragic scene just now. It was already difficult for a god to cross by himself, let alone bring others. However, if that was the case, wouldn't many of them really have to stop here? The gate of heaven is about to open, and everyone wants to go to the illusory god palace, but it's not that easy. The strong are respected, and if you don't have enough strength, you're just courting death. The black-robed elder's words were like a bucket of cold water poured over everyone's heads. Although it was unpleasant to hear, it was the truth. Those 2 gods were quite strong, but what happened in the end? All of them fell into the sea and were completely annihilated. Not even a complete corpse was left behind. Could it be that only venerables can enter the illusory god palace? Someone muttered in a low voice. His voice was filled with disappointment and defeat. Shengguan Jing looked at Chu Luiyue and asked hesitantly, "Little you, what do you think we should do now?" There were a total of 6 of them. He, Chu Luiyue, and Xin Yi were all honored gods. The remaining 3 were only high gods. Chu Luiyue said, "Let's go together." Together. Shengguan Jing frowned. She had clearly seen the situation just now. It was impossible for her not to know how dangerous it was to do so. But she was still so insistent. "Little girl, why don't you think about it again? The road ahead is dangerous. If we advance recklessly, I'm afraid." "Taizu, don't worry. I know what to do. I won't gamble with Shuang Shuang and the others' lives. Chu Liuyue's voice was very soft, but her tone was very firm. Many people around them heard their conversation and turned to look at them. They looked at Chu Liuyue as if they were looking at a stubborn lunatic. What did Shang Wanjing just say? All of them. Did she make a mistake? Half of them are only high gods. I've heard that she's very bold. Now that I've met her today, she really lives up to her reputation. Where did she get her confidence from? I'd like to see how she's going to bring those people over safely. There was no lack of people in the crowd who wanted to see a joke. Seeing Chu Liuyue's insistence, Shang Wanjing could only agree. Then, be careful. Chu Liuyue nodded. She tapped the tip of her foot lightly, and her slender and delicate figure instantly flew up and landed on the surface of the sea. Boundless pressure instantly surged in from all directions, enveloping her completely. Almost at the same time, turbulent force surged out of Chu Liuyue's dantian and filled every yuan meridian around her. A layer of beautiful soft armor covered her body and flickered with a faint glow. The two forces inside and outside her body clashed with each other and instantly cancelled out a lot of the pressure. Moreover, she had summoned her godly body, which greatly reduced the impact on her body. After a series of actions, she easily resolved the problem of the terrifying pressure around her. The only troublesome thing was that it consumed a terrifying amount of force. However, coincidentally, this was what she lacked the most. Chu Liuyue continuously urged the force in her body to surge out. To others, this place might be extremely dangerous, but to her, it was really nothing. Shuang Shuang. Chu Liuyue turned around and shouted at the people who were still standing on the shore. Hua Shuang Shuang reacted quickly and immediately responded. Before he finished speaking, he was already charging toward Chu Liuyue. Like the others before him, he slowed down the moment he stepped onto the sea. At this moment, a silver-red flowing light surged out from Chu Liuyue's body and drew a brilliant rainbow under the dark sky. Divine territory. Seeing this scene, the two venerated gods standing on the silver bridge could not help but exclaim in shock. The two of them looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. Others might not know, but the two of them knew best. On the surface of the sea, the pressure was heavy. It was already extremely difficult to pass through, let alone anything else. In any case, the two of them had been completely suppressed earlier and could not summon their own divine territories. However, Chu Liuyue seemed to be very relaxed. The silver-red divine territory surged like a river and reached Hua Shuang Shuang in the blink of an eye. With this divine territory, Hua Shuang Shuang's movements became much more convenient. His figure flashed, and he quickly moved forward along the god domain. Chu Liuyue's divine territory covered almost half of the sea. Hua Shuang Shuang did not take long to reach the silver bridge from the shore. Finally, with a leap, he landed firmly on the silver bridge. Everyone was dumbfounded by what they saw. Is this possible? Is this possible? Little Hachi! Chu Liuyue shouted again. Little Hachi tucked her hair behind her ears and walked forward, twisting her slender waist. As she walked, she waved her hand at the person who had made sarcastic remarks just now and chuckled. Just now, you said that you wanted to see what our master would do, right? Now, you have to watch carefully. After all, this is an opportunity that you can only watch. As she spoke, she flew up and followed Hua Shuang Shuang's path. It did not take much effort for her to reach Hua Shuang Shuang's side. Oh, it's so crowded here. Little Hachi covered her mouth and smiled. I'll have to trouble the two seniors to move over there. There are still quite a few people behind us. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2190. The eyes of the two venerable gods who were the first to arrive twitched. Why do these words sound so infuriating? However, little Hachi was enchanting and beautiful, and she smiled sweetly. They could not throw a tantrum at a young lady, so they could only walk stiffly to the side. Thank you, seniors. Little Hachi's smile deepened as she yawned. Hey, second brother, don't you think it's boring? Hua Shuang knew that she had always been the most vengeful. She must have been angered by those people's mockery just now, so she deliberately angered them. He gently knocked little Hachi's forehead. You've been spoiled by your master. Little Hachi snorted. Hua Shuang continued to comfort her. Why don't we guess who can come over? Isn't this a little interesting? Little Eighth was instantly energized and nudged him with his elbow. His brows relaxed as he smiled. Second brother, I haven't seen you in a few years, but you haven't changed at all. Yes, I still like to watch shows like before. But I like it too. Look at those people's expressions. It's really exciting. Just now, they were all waiting to add insult to injury, but now, they're all stunned on the spot and can't say a word, right? There aren't many opportunities to slap people in the face, so I have to seize it. Hua Shuang said seriously. I'm also worried that everyone can't come over. After all, it's not easy to come here, right? If we can only watch others pass by, wouldn't it be very uncomfortable? The two of them echoed each other, making the group of people so angry that their faces turned green. However, the truth was right in front of them. Chu Luiyue had indeed sent them all over easily. Even if they wanted to refute, they could not find anything to say. Amidst the strange silence, Chang Wanzhou quickly arrived. Finally, Cin Yi and Sheng Wanjing arrived. After they arrived at the Silver Bridge, Chu Luiyue moved his wrist and planned to put away the God Realm. At that moment, a voice suddenly came from the crowd. Master Yu, wait. Chu Luiyue turned around. The person who spoke was a middle-aged man. Master Yu, we have a presumptuous request. Since it's a presumptuous request, there's no need to say it. Chu Luiyue interrupted the other party and quickly put away his divine territory. With a single step, he arrived on the Silver Bridge. Everyone was speechless. The middle-aged man's face instantly turned into the color of a pig's liver. He was extremely embarrassed. However, he still refused to give up. He gritted his teeth and continued. Master Yu, we just want to ask you for a favor. As long as you can help us cross this sea, we will reward you handsomely. Chu Luiyue looked at him strangely. Heavy reward. How heavy is it? The man choked instantly. In the Divine Ruins world, who didn't know that Chu Luiyue was rich? There was a large group of divine beasts, a large pile of venerable divine artifacts, and all kinds of precious heavenly treasures. What did she lack? What could possibly catch her eye? Perhaps it was because he was questioned by Chu Luiyue in front of so many people, the man felt a little embarrassed. His expression became a little unsightly. To Master Yu, this is just a piece of cake. Even so, Master Yu is still unwilling to help. Chu Luiyue was stunned for a moment before he chuckled softly. Little Hachi blinked and said coquettishly. Master, so there really is such a shameless person in this world. He's not related to me at all, yet he has the cheek to ask me for help like this. TSK, what a big face. Most importantly, he's very ugly. That's even uglier. The man's expression instantly turned even uglier. You. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2191. Let's not talk about whether this is a piece of cake for me. Even if it is, it has nothing to do with you, does it? Little Hachi and the others are my people, so of course I have to take them with me. As for you, if you're willing to return to Peach Blossom Cove and call me Master for the rest of your life, I can consider it. Chu Luiyue said slowly. These words were like a resounding slap to the man's face. Sheng Wanyu. Don't go overboard. If you don't want to help, just say so. What's the point of insulting me like that? Chu Luiyue was surprised. I thought I made myself very clear, but you didn't understand. But you don't seem to understand, so I can only be more straightforward. In the end, he was the one who brought this humiliation upon himself. Who else could he blame? The man's expression changed. He was furious. Fine. If you're so capable, wait until the divine gate opens. Let's see if you can still have the last laugh. Chu Luiyue looked away lazily. You don't have to worry about that. If you have the time and energy, you'd better think about how to get over. That one sentence finally blocked the rest of the man's words. As for the others present, they looked at each other and secretly exchanged glances. Chu Luiyue was clearly not going to help, so they had to think of another way. That was normal. Everyone was here to compete with each other. It was good enough that they could take care of their own people. Who would want to help others for no reason? Chu Luiyue could easily bring her subordinates over because she had the ability. What right did others have to ask her to help? After a brief silence, the remaining people finally tried to cross the sea and reach the Silver Bridge. Her Eminence was able to make it, but none of the great gods were able to make it over safely. Although there was only a difference of one word between the two, there was a huge gap between their strengths. It was like a natural chasm that was difficult to cross. After another 7 great gods died in the sea, the remaining great gods finally gave up. In the end, only 23 high deities made it onto the bridge. The middle-aged man who wanted Chu Luiyue's help was among them, but the rest of the people who came with him stayed on the shore. Including Chu Luiyue and the others who had arrived earlier, there were a total of 31 people. Among these people, Hua Shuangshuang and the other 2 were the only high gods. In this way, the 3 of them became rather special existences. However, under the protection of Chu Luiyue and the others, the remaining people could not express anything. The middle-aged man stared at Chu Luiyue with a cold look in his eyes. Little Hachi moved closer to Chu Luiyue and said in a low voice, Master, I think that person already hates us. I'm afraid that he will think of ways to make things difficult for us. Chu Luiyue shook his head. Ignore him. She had always been sharp, so she naturally sensed the other party's hostility. However, she did not take this seriously. If she was worried about this, she would not have acted like that just now. She did not take the initiative to cause trouble, but she was also not afraid of trouble. Little Hachi saw that she was staring at the silver bridge under her feet with great concentration. She also tilted her head and looked at it a few times, but unfortunately, she did not see anything. Master, what's so interesting about this bridge? Have you been looking at it since you came up? Chu Luiyue said. Look at the patterns on it. Patterns? Little Adi's brows furrowed slightly. She saw that there were only some flickering light spots on it, but there were no patterns. Chu Luiyue bent down, stretched out a finger, and lightly tapped on one of the light spots. Bang! A slight cracking sound could be heard. The palm-sized light spot suddenly spread out, and light scattered in all directions. In the blink of an eye, it condensed into a small Xian formation. The pattern was complicated and dazzling. Most importantly, this was a great Xian Emperor Master-level Xian formation. Chu Luiyue's pupils shrank. She had already felt that there was something wrong with this light spot, but she did not expect that such an inconspicuous little light spot was actually a Xian formation of this level. After a moment, that Xian formation closed up again, and the light scattered, returning to that blurry light spot. It did not seem to be a threat at all. If they did not see it with their own eyes, no one would believe what had just happened. Just now, that was a great Xian Emperor Master-level Xian formation. When Chu Luiyue moved, the people at the side were more or less paying attention to her, so they all saw the scene. At that moment, everyone was shocked. Chu Luiyue stood up and looked forward. At this moment, they were standing at the bottom of this silver bridge. Going up, countless light spots gathered, condensing into this peculiar bridge. The light spots flickered, and there were almost countless of them. If these were all Xian formations, Chu Luiyue held her breath. She originally thought that the flowing cloud flying diagram, which had accumulated over 1,000 Xian formations, was already an extremely powerful existence. However, at this moment, compared to this silver bridge that extended from the sea to the sky, it was simply a small magician in the presence of a great magician. No, it could even be said that there was no comparison at all. It was hard to imagine what kind of shocking scene it would be if all these light spots bloomed at the same time and all the Xian formations operated at the same time. No wonder this place has such astonishing heaven and earth energy, Chu Luiyue muttered softly. The black-robed elder who was the first to arrive let out a long sigh. So many Xian formations gathered to form a bridge that leads to the sky. I really wonder what kind of existence the illusory god palace at the end of the bridge is. Actually, this was also what everyone was thinking. Just this bridge alone was already incomparably shocking. As for that mysterious illusory god palace, it was probably even more. Dong. Another sound of the bell rang out. Some people could no longer hold back and walked up. Once one person took the lead, the rest would quickly follow. Everyone walked up the bridge one after another, heading straight for the door in the sky. Chu Luiyue was about to walk forward when she suddenly caught a glimpse of Chang Wanzhou from the corner of her eyes. His brows were tightly knitted, and his expression seemed to be somewhat painful. "Little Zhou, what's wrong?" Chu Luiyue asked. Chang Wanzhou raised his head and looked over, shaking his head. "I'm fine. It's just that just now I felt a little dizzy." Chu Luiyue's brows slightly furrowed. "Is it serious?" This didn't seem to be the first time this had happened. Recently, Chang Wanzhou seemed to be prone to headaches and dizziness. This had almost never happened before. Chu Luiyue couldn't help but feel a little worried. Chang Wanzhou pursed his lips. "I'm fine." Chu Luiyue helped him take his pulse and found that his body was indeed normal. "Maybe it's because I haven't rested well recently." Chang Wanzhou retracted his hand. "These few days, I've been having some messy dreams." Chu Luiyue nodded. "If you feel uncomfortable, feel free to tell me." Chang Wanzhou responded. At this moment, they were already at the back. The people in front had already walked some distance. Chu Luiyue raised his chin. "Let's go. Wonderful book house." Chapter 2192. Dong. Another bell chime was heard. It was getting closer and closer to the opening of the gate of heaven. At first, there were still some whispers in the crowd, but the closer they got, the more tense the atmosphere became. They gradually quieted down. Finally, everyone moved forward in silence. Only the excitement and anticipation in their eyes showed that they were not as calm as they looked. Chu Luiyue moved forward step by step. She could clearly hear the sound of her heart beating, and the blood in her body seemed to be flowing faster. Blood was gurgling under her eardrums. She faintly felt that something was about to rush out from her dantian. But every time she wanted to observe it carefully, that inexplicable throbbing would disappear. This made the whole process extremely long. Every once in a while, the bell would ring. Dong! The 10th bell. Shengguan Jing said in a low voice. At this moment, they were only a short distance away from the gate. Chu Luiyue nodded lightly. She had a feeling that perhaps, when the 12th bell rang, the gate of heaven would open. There were already people in front of the gate and stopped. When the 11th bell rang, Chu Luyue and the others also came to the gate. She stood behind the crowd and looked at the gate in front of her. This gate was extremely tall, and people standing here seemed extremely small. Countless streams of light intertwined, outlining its outline, but its specific appearance could not be seen clearly. A thin layer of clouds covered it, and no one could see through it. However, the crowd was able to clearly sense that heavy and imposing aura. This reminded Chu Luyue of the palace in the Red Moon Desert. She wondered what it had to do with the illusory god palace. After a long wait, the 12th bell finally rang. Dong! This bell was heavy and distant, and it spread far and wide between heaven and earth. Then, the gate finally opened slowly. Creak, everyone's spirits were lifted as they focused their gazes on that direction. Brilliant golden light shone, almost blinding them. Chu Luyue tilted her head and narrowed her eyes. After a while, the light gradually dissipated. A man in his 30s, dressed in a gray robe, walked out of the door. As soon as he appeared, Chu Luyue's heart trembled. This man's aura was extremely strong. He was much stronger than all the primordial gods she had seen before. He was probably only one step away from the rumored threshold. She glanced quickly at the man again. He had a tall and straight figure and a handsome face. There was a faint arrogance in his eyes. He stood in front of the door, his scrutinizing and imposing gaze sweeping across everyone. He spoke in a low voice, and his voice was clear yet carried an indescribable pressure. The Mirage God Palace's heavenly gate opens once every 10,000 years to recruit the best cultivators in the world to ascend to the heavens and break through the gods. You are the first batch to arrive at the opening of the heavenly gate. It can be seen that your aptitudes are not bad. Everyone was excited, but they still held their breaths in concentration, not daring to slack off in the slightest. I am Jin Yunlai, the 7th Divine Envoy of the Illusory God Palace. I am in charge of leading you into the Illusory God Palace. You will follow the order and enter the book one by one. Saying so, he raised his hand, and a thick book appeared in his palm. Then, he opened the book, and his other hand flashed with light, summoning a crimson gold feather pen. When she saw the feather in his hand, Chu Luyue's heart tensed up. That was the feather of the crimson gold heavenly phoenix. Ah, you! I want to go out. Ah, you! Tuanzi also sensed the breath and immediately wanted to come out. Chu Luyue comforted her in her mind, Dumpling, don't worry, wait until we enter the heavenly gate. It won't be too late to check then. There can't be any mistakes right now. Hearing her say that, Dumpling finally calmed down. Then you must take a good look and see if that is Grandpa Patriarch's feather. Chu Luyue nodded without batting an eyelid. Luckily, this small disturbance didn't attract that person's attention. The people standing in front had already started to step forward. Name. Jin Yunlai held the book in one hand and a pen in the other, asking in a deep voice. Song Qing. The first to step forward was the black-robed elder who was the first to step on the silver bridge. Even though he had seen many storms, he still couldn't hide his excitement at this moment. Jin Yunlai raised her hand and used the crimson gold feather to gently sweep it between Song Qing's eyebrows. Song Qing felt as if there was an eye that was looking at him from the inside out. The force in his body surged, and a pattern appeared between his eyebrows. That was the totem of his bloodline power. Jin Yunlai nodded and wrote his name on the book. Pass. Next. Song Qing was originally a bit nervous, but he didn't think that he would pass the inspection so smoothly. He was happy and immediately responded. Thank you, Divine Envoy Jin. In the Illusion God Palace, the title of Divine Envoy is the highest honor, there is no need to use a name. You can just call me the 7th Divine Envoy. Jin Yunlai said indifferently. Song Qing's heart skipped a beat, and he quickly bowed. Yes. Seeing that Jin Yunlai wasn't angry, he relaxed and stepped through the heaven gate. When the crowd saw this scene, they were all extremely envious. The second person tried his best to restrain his excitement and walked forward. The process was the same as before. After he reported his name, Jin Yunlai swept the feather between his eyebrows again. Pass. Next. There were a total of 31 people who came here, and Jin Yunlai's inspection speed was extremely fast. Soon, more than half of them had gone through. Soon, it was the middle-aged man who asked Chu Luiyue for help but was rejected. With a face full of eagerness, he bowed his head and said respectfully, "This one is Qing Pei, greetings to the seventh divine envoy. This one has admired the illusion god palace for a long time. Today, don't talk so much nonsense." Jin Yunlai's face showed some impatience, and her voice carried a warning. In the illusion god palace, strength is everything. Everything else is false, understand? Many of the onlookers looked at him with ridicule. He wanted to flatter, but he hit the nail on the head. Don't you know where you are? Qing Pei's face turned pale. Only then did he realize what a stupid thing he had done. He quickly said, I understand. Jin Yunlai swept the feather between his eyebrows and said coldly, "Pass." Next. Qing Pei walked over with his legs shaking. It took him a while to recover. Soon, everyone was finished with the inspection, and only 6 people, including Chu Luiyue, were left. Shengguan Jing followed him and passed smoothly. Chu Luiyue walked forward. "Shengguan Yu." Jin Yunlai glanced at her and raised her eyebrows. "You've become a supreme god at such a young age. Thank you for the compliment, seventh divine envoy." Chu Luiyue replied in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. Jin Yunlai nodded in satisfaction, then swept the feather between Chu Luiyue's eyebrows. Then, his face turned serious. Chu Luiyue's eyebrows were as smooth as before. There was no sign of a totem. Chapter 2193. Jin Yunlai tried again. The reddish-gold feather gently swept across her forehead, but there was still nothing between her eyebrows. His eyes became cold and stern as he looked at Chu Luiyue with a scrutinizing gaze. "Where's your totem?" Totem. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat as she instantly understood what had happened. She paused for a moment and said, "Seventh divine envoy, I don't have a totem." "No." Jin Yunlai frowned. Chu Luiyue explained, "I came from outside the divine ruins world, so I don't have a bloodline totem." Of course she did. Even if she wasn't from the divine ruins world, there was indeed a strange totem in her body. Otherwise, when she tested the bloodline power level with the infinite divine dial in the Yuntian Tower, she wouldn't have been able to get a score of 11. However, even she herself didn't know what was going on. From the moment she was reborn in Chu Luiyue's body, that strange pattern had already appeared. At first, she didn't pay much attention to it. Later, when she went to the divine ruins world, she found out that it was the so-called bloodline totem. However, that thing came and went sometimes, and even she couldn't control it. She only remembered that when she was in danger, the totem seemed to be burning between her eyebrows. However, it would often disappear very quickly. "You're from outside the divine ruins world." Jin Yunlai looked her up and down, the admiration in her eyes fading in an instant, and even a hint of contempt flashed in her eyes. Although this look dissipated quickly, Chu Luiyue quickly caught it. Her brows furrowed ever so slightly. It was just that she didn't have a bloodline totem. Why did the seventh divine envoy look down on her in an instant? Many people would look at her in a new light when they heard that she came from outside the divine ruins world and didn't inherit the bloodline power. Because from a certain point of view, this meant that her talent was stronger than others, which was why she could break through so quickly and reach the god realm. However, this person seemed to be the opposite. Jin Yunlai took out something and handed it over. Those without a bloodline totem will need to tie this tongue to their bodies when they enter the illusory god palace. Chu Luiyue took the item and looked at it carefully. It was a small pendant made of red string with a transparent ball the size of a chess piece tied to it. The material of the round ball was neither gold nor jade, it was clear and lustrous. There was a small golden word, illusion, drawn on it. For those without bloodline power, the possibility of ascending to the heavens and becoming a god is almost zero. Originally, you did not have the qualifications to come here, but since you have crossed the bridge, this divine envoy will give you a chance. If you don't meet the requirements of your cultivation within the stipulated time, the words in this ball of tongue will gradually dissipate. When it completely disappears, that is when you leave the illusory god palace, do you understand? It turned out that this was something that tested the speed of one's cultivation, and it seemed to have a lot to do with the power of one's bloodline. Chu Luiyue tied the tongue around his waist. Thank you, seventh divine envoy. Jin Yunlai didn't pay any more attention to him, and raised his chin. Next. Compared to before, his attitude was a lot colder. Obviously, he didn't think highly of Chu Luiyue, so much so that he didn't even say half a word. Chu Luiyue didn't care, and stepped over the threshold. At this moment, the water droplet in her dantian suddenly trembled. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately suppressed this fluctuation. Fortunately, this movement was very small, and it didn't attract the attention of the others. She came to a place not far from Song Qing and the others, and calmly waited for the others to come over. I didn't think that there would be a time when Yu Zhu would be defeated. Cheng Pei said in a strange tone. Of all the people who came, only Chu Luiyue received Jin Yunlai's praise. Originally, they all thought that Chu Luiyue would have a meteoric rise. Who knew that just because she didn't have a bloodline totem, Jin Yunlai's attitude would take a 180-degree turn. This time, Chu Luiyue's days in the illusory god palace wouldn't be easy. Jin Yunlai had already said that it was impossible for her to ascend to the heavens and break through to godhood. Yu Zhu is a genius, and you've already broken through to godhood at such a young age. We were originally waiting to see Yu Zhu reach the top and take another step forward. Unfortunately, it seems that it's impossible now. What a pity. Cheng Pei's eyes were filled with unconcealable schadenfreude. Everyone put in so much effort to come here in order to break through the shackles and ascend to a higher realm. But Chu Luiyue had just come here, and before she could do anything, Jin Yunlai had already sentenced her to death. Wasn't this the same as extinguishing all of her chessboard and desires? Chu Luiyue smiled faintly and said, Cheng Pei, don't feel sorry for me. Even if I can't ascend to godhood in the end, with my current godhood, it won't be a problem for me to deal with those who are outwardly strong but inwardly weak. As she spoke, she looked at her hand and said slowly, I'm sorry. I remember that back then, I almost used this hand to send Family E on his way. But I've always respected the old and loved the young, so I usually won't use such a killing move unless I can't help it. You! Cheng Pei's face turned red and white at the same time. He wanted to refute, but when he saw Chu Luiyue's nonchalant attitude, he felt some fear in his heart. He was no match for Yi Wentao. When Chu Luiyue was still a high god, she had already taken half of Yi Wentao's life, let alone now that she was a god. Furthermore, when they were in that sea region, everyone had clearly seen that her power was much greater than what they had expected. This Chu Luiyue. They couldn't afford to provoke her. At the very least, it wasn't a suitable choice to fight her head-on now. Cheng Pei took a few deep breaths and flicked his sleeves. Humph. I hope Yu Zhu can always be so confident. Let's see how arrogant she can be after entering the illusory god palace. The others present didn't say anything. They secretly exchanged glances with each other with subtle expressions. Originally, they also wanted to rope in Chu Luiyue, but looking at the current situation, she might even be a burden. If that was the case, they would have to consider carefully. Chu Luiyue pretended not to see the various gazes around her. Of course, she knew that these people had their own thoughts. But no matter what attitude they had towards her, she didn't care much. From the beginning, her purpose here was different from theirs. The fewer interactions they had, the less trouble they would have. She looked at the people who were still outside the door. Behind her was Sheng Wanjing. Like Chu Luiyue, he didn't have a totem. Then, there was a Tuan Xanz at his waist. After him was Tsini. When Jin Yunlai saw him, she was stunned for a moment and then frowned slightly. You have been to the Illusory God Palace before. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2194. After asking this question, Jin Yunlai was stunned. He must be crazy to ask such a question. The Illusion God Palace only opened once every 10,000 years. How could this man have been here before? No. Tsini answered calmly. His eyes were calm, as if he didn't care about Jin Yunlai's strange question. Jin Yunlai scanned his forehead. As expected, he didn't have a bloodline totem. He could already tell that the people behind him were close to the Shangguanyu who had just entered. They probably came from outside the Divine Ruins world. He waved his hand in annoyance. Yes. Tsini held a ball and stepped over the threshold to Chu Liyue's side. Jin Yunlai looked back again. In that instant, that familiar feeling. It was as if he had seen him somewhere before. But that man's appearance and aura were indeed unfamiliar. I'm probably mistaken, Jin Yunlai retracted his gaze. Chu Luiyue looked at Jin Yunlai and then at Tsini. He asked in a low voice, Tsini, why did he ask you that? Tsini smiled faintly. I don't know either. Maybe he got the wrong person. Chu Luiyue thought about it and also found it strange. Are you a high god? At this moment, Jin Yunlai's voice sounded again. Chu Luiyue looked up and saw that Hua Shuangshuang was being checked. Not only did he not have a bloodline totem, he wasn't even a high god. Jin Yunlai frowned and didn't hide his impatience and contempt. High gods are not allowed to enter. You can go back. Hua Shuangshuang was stunned and then cupped his fists. Seventh Divine Envoy, may I ask why? High gods can't pass through the sea, so they naturally don't have the right to enter the Illusion God Palace. Jin Yunlai said coldly. But now that we're here, why can't we enter? Hua Shuangshuang laughed and asked. Jin Yunlai's expression turned even colder. He glanced at little Hachi and Chang Wanzhou. The three of you are all high gods. Actually, it wasn't that no high gods had entered the Illusion God Palace before. However, most of them had bloodline totems, and their own bloodline power was extremely strong. However, all three of them were high gods, and if his guess was correct, none of them had a bloodline totem. No one had entered the Illusion God Palace. Seventh Divine Envoy. Chu Luiyue suddenly spoke. I was the one who brought the three of them here. Although I used some tricks, no one said that I couldn't do that. Now that we're here, it can be said that we're fated with the Illusion God Palace. If you don't allow them to enter just because they aren't exalted gods and don't have totems, then perhaps you shouldn't have set up the sea region below from the beginning. You should have just selected people from the group that you've chosen. Jin Yunlai stared at him coldly. You're quite brave. She dared to talk to him like that. Chu Liyue's lips curved. I'm just speaking the truth. Also, I'm thinking for you. You said that the Illusion God Palace's heavenly gate opens every 10,000 years to recruit the best cultivators. Although they're not high gods yet, they're all very outstanding. If you let them leave, it'll be a loss for the Illusion God Palace. Jin Yunlai looked like she heard a joke. I've already said that a cultivator without a bloodline totem would never be able to ascend to the heavens and ascend to godhood. Moreover, they aren't even gods now. Since you're so sure, you should let them in. That way, the Illusion God Palace will be fair and it won't affect the overall situation. After all, when the time is up, the words in the letter will disappear. Those without strength will be kicked out of the Illusion God Palace. Jin Yunlai was silent for a moment. His expression changed as if he was thinking about Chu Liuyue's words. After a while, he finally nodded. Good. Then I'll see how long you can stay here. Then, he finally wrote down Hua Shuangshuang and the other two's names on the list and gave each of them a letter. When Chang Wanzhou, who was the last in line, also walked in, Jin Yunlai finally said, "Come with me." As he spoke, he took the lead and walked forward. Song Qing looked at the open door and couldn't help but ask, "Seventh Divine Envoy, the Heavenly Gate, once the Heavenly Gate opens, it will last for a year. In this year, anyone who steps on the bridge and comes to the door will be able to enter the Illusion God Palace." Jin Yunlai said without turning his head. Similarly, if you can't reach a certain level in this year, you'll also be kicked out. Hearing this, everyone was stunned. Yes. They thought that everything would be fine once they entered, but who knew that it was just the beginning? How could it be so easy to improve? The people who were still rejoicing that they successfully entered became nervous again. Compared to their excitement, Chu Liuyue's mood was much calmer. The 1-year deadline wasn't very important to her. Because she came here mainly to find Dugu Maobao and the other two, as well as Yi Zhao. Of course, if possible, she also wanted to know what kind of place the Illusion God Palace was. Stepping through the Heavenly Gate, there was an extremely wide road in front of them. This was a road carved out of black jade. Just like the silver bridge, there were pieces of silver light quietly flashing on it. They were scattered all over the place, presenting an indescribable sense of beauty. In the chaos, there seemed to be some kind of pattern. But unlike the bridge, these light spots were locked under the black jade stone. An extremely thin layer of translucent jade covered it perfectly. It was enshrouded in balls of light, which were bright and dazzling. Master, these are also Xian formations, right? With previous experience, little Hachi saw this scene and subconsciously associated it with the bridge from before. Chu Liyue nodded slightly. Even if she didn't look carefully, she could confirm that these were indeed Xian formations. And, compared to the ones outside, they were probably higher and not lower. This road leads directly from the Heavenly Gate to the Illusion God Palace. There are countless top-grade Xian formations gathered on it. Regardless of whether it's light or dark, they are all shining like stars and illuminating everything. Jin Yunlai explained indifferently. The Xian formations on it can be cultivated and studied. Everyone was shocked. There are so many, and we can all comprehend and cultivate. One had to know that every high-grade Xian formation was an intangible treasure. Even those who came from first-rate families like them wouldn't be willing to take out their treasures. However, this illusory god palace had directly engraved so many Xian formations on the star path. Jin Yunlai suddenly laughed and looked up. There are countless Xian formations in the Illusion God Palace. I'm not afraid of you seeing them, I'm just afraid that you won't understand them. Chapter 2195. His tone was indifferent and carried a bone-deep arrogance. Everyone was silent for a moment. Although these words made people feel uncomfortable, they had to admit that there was nothing wrong with them. To be able to gather such a shocking number of Xian formations to form a bridge and a path was already enough to explain many things. The foundation of the illusory god palace was probably not something they could imagine. Little Hachi's red lips curled and she almost rolled her eyes. But considering that they were in someone else's territory, she held back. The previously noisy crowd quieted down. At this moment, they finally realized what kind of place they had come to. In the Divine Ruins world, they were undoubtedly the top experts. Their status was respected and they were admired by others. In the end, after coming to this place, they became the lowest level existences in this place. The change in status was too sudden, and many people found it hard to accept. Even if they had mentally prepared themselves before coming here, who would be able to laugh and admit that they were too weak when it really came to this? Jin Yunlai seemed to know what they were thinking. The corner of his mouth curled up, but there was no smile in his eyes. This divine envoy knows that you are not convinced. But after a long time, you will naturally recognize everything. As he spoke, he raised his hand and pointed to the left. In the distance, there was a continuous mountain range. Over there is the herb mountain of the illusory god palace. There are many natural treasures growing there. Whatever you want, you can go and take it. As long as the grade of the pills refined is high enough, you can choose anything you want. It doesn't matter even if you sleep there. A few people couldn't help but suck in a cold breath. This was really big. Jin Yunlai pointed to the right again. They could vaguely see a surging light that seemed to be a lake. And over there is a lightning pool that specializes in refining tools. The Tianlei inside is also inexhaustible. If you have the ability, you can go and try the power of the lightning pool. This time, everyone was completely silent. Such generosity and confidence, it was really hard to not be convinced. As for origin cultivation, it is the simplest. As you can see, there are countless courtyards on both sides of the star path. You can choose any one of them as your residence. You can cultivate there in the future. Chu Luiyue looked to both sides and saw that there were indeed houses that were arranged in picturesque disorder. Normally, you can come and go as you please. However, there are two places in the illusory god palace that you cannot go to. Jin Yunlai said as she looked ahead. One is the illusory god's palace up ahead, and the other is the forbidden area behind the illusory god's palace. If you trespass into these two places without permission, the consequences are not something you can bear. Do you understand? Towards the end, his tone became increasingly stern. Everyone's heart trembled. Yes. Thank you for your advice, Seventh Oracle. Chu Luiyue followed his gaze and looked in front, but she was instantly dazed. At the end of the star path, a magnificent palace stood quietly. As for this palace, she had seen it before. This was the pavilion in the sky that had once appeared in the Red Moon Desert. However, at this time, without the layer of white fog, everything could be seen clearly. Above the palace, there was a plaque with golden words. The words on it were vigorous and powerful, like a graceful swan, like a swimming dragon. Illusory God's Palace. Digression, yesterday, I wrote that Taizu had reviewed it. It was considered a small bug, and it had been fixed. Continued at 6 p.m. Guess Rong Xiu's final identity. Chapter 2196. It was different from the blurry scene she saw before. The palace in front of her was grand, ancient, and filled with a sense of holiness that made people not dare to look at it directly. Although it looked the same on the outside, Chu Luiyue inexplicably felt that the aura of the palace of the illusory god was somewhat different. As for what was different, it was hard for her to say. Someone in the crowd also recognized the palace of the illusory god and pointed at it in surprise. Isn't that the one before? Oh. Before he could finish his sentence, that person felt an incomparably powerful pressure suddenly descend upon him. He was not prepared at all. He only felt a weight on his shoulders and his legs involuntarily knelt down. Plop! His knees heavily hit the jade road, making a muffled sound. That person sucked in a breath of cold air from the pain. Jin Yunlai came in front of him, looked down at him, and coldly reprimanded, "The palace of the illusory god is a supreme existence. How dare you point your finger at it and offend it?" That person's face turned white. Only then did he realize that he had just committed a grave mistake. I know my mistake. Please forgive me, God Envoy." Jin Yunlai's eyes were as cold as a knife. His gaze landed on that person's body as if it was solid. Until that person could not take it anymore, he finally slowly opened his mouth. "There won't be a next time." "Yes. Yes. Thank you, God Envoy." That person immediately thanked him as if he had been pardoned. Jin Yunlai looked around. "Remember, in this palace of the illusory god, you must pay attention to everything you say and do. That's all I have to say. Take care of yourselves." Everyone bowed their heads in agreement. Jin Yunlai then turned and left, continuing to walk in the direction of the palace of the illusory god. It wasn't until his figure gradually disappeared into the distance that the kneeling man let out a long sigh and staggered to his feet. At this time, his face was already pale and his forehead was covered with fine beads of sweat. It could be seen how nervous he was just now. However, no one mocked him. Instead, they all had complicated expressions. He had only raised his hand to point at the so-called palace of the illusory god, and he had almost lost his life. The rules of the illusory god palace were extremely strict. Their strengths were about the same. If it were them, they wouldn't be much better off than that man. Feeling the same way, they naturally couldn't relax. "Looks like I have to be careful with my words and actions in the illusory god palace." Song Qing stroked his beard and sighed. Everyone fell silent, and the atmosphere became icy cold and stagnant. Suddenly, a man's voice came from the side. "It's not too late to realize this now." Hearing this, everyone turned their heads to look. In a courtyard not far away, there was a man who looked to be about 30 years old. He had his arms crossed and was leaning against the door, looking over. He had a toothpick in his mouth and looked a little sloppy. However, the aura emitted from his body was much stronger than everyone else's. There's even one with Tuan Xanz. The man's eyes swept over Chu Luiyue, saw the letter tied to her waist, and then looked at her face, and suddenly revealed a look of surprise. "Your Eminence is so young. That's impossible, right?" She didn't have a bloodline totem and had broken through to God. Logically speaking, she should be a few decades older, or even over 100 years old. "Little girl, how old are you this year?" he asked curiously. "You look less than 100 years old, right?" "Chu Luiyue, this junior is 18 this year." 18? You're lying, right?" the man said subconsciously. "I say, little girl, you really don't have to be like this. We're all people who have lived for thousands of years. Even if you're over 100 years old, or even older, you're still young to us." Chu Luiyue said, "This junior is speaking the truth." Seeing her calm expression and sincere eyes, the man realized that she wasn't lying. He immediately spat out the toothpick, stood up straight, and carefully sized her up. However, he still couldn't believe it. Seeing that the people beside him didn't react, he suddenly slapped his thigh. "It's really true." Chu Luiyue didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This junior has no need to lie about this. "That's true." The man nodded in agreement, then leaned lazily against the door frame. He looked at her with pity in his eyes. Such great talent. What a waste. Chu Liuyue's heart skipped a beat. She had already grasped the meaning of this sentence. The Illusion God Palace has never had a god under the age of 20. You're the first. It's a pity that you don't have a bloodline totem. He shook his head, looking regretful. Chu Liyue had already heard about this from Jin Yunlai, so she didn't have much of a reaction. Ha, so there's more than one tongue-tied person. The man's eyes turned, and only then did he see that Xin Yi and the others also had tongue-tied people hanging on them. Counting, there were 6 in total. Most importantly, there were 3 exalted gods among them. How did you guys get here? Is it so easy to enter the Illusion God Palace now? Little Hachi was already in a bad mood. When she heard this, she finally couldn't hold it in anymore. She stepped forward and was about to speak. Chu Liyue pressed her hand, smiled at the man, and said, "We passed the same test as everyone else. Since the 7th divine emissary was willing to let us in, it's enough to prove everything, isn't it?" After mentioning Jin Yunlai, the man became much more restrained. He chuckled and said, "You're right. The divine emissaries have always been the most impartial. Don't misunderstand, I don't have any other intentions. I'm just a little surprised." After all, the Illusion God Palace has never let 6 people without bloodline totems in at once before. Even exalted gods were included. Chu Liyue nodded, indicating that she didn't care. From Jin Yunlai's attitude, she could already guess what kind of treatment they would receive in the Illusion God Palace in the future. She was already prepared, and didn't feel that the other party was deliberately offending her. The other party didn't show any contempt, and even tried to explain himself. This was already good enough. Chu Liyue cupped her hands and asked, "This junior is Sheng Wanyu, may I know senior's name?" The man smiled and shook his head. "No need to call me senior. I'm just a failure who hasn't reached the heavens in 10,000 years. You can just call me Xiao Ran. Here, there's no seniority. As long as you're strong enough, you'll be respected and admired by everyone." Chu Liyue nodded. She stared at the palace of the illusory god for a moment before turning around and walking towards the courtyard next to it. "Let's go." Since they were already here, they should find a suitable place to stay first. Shengguan Jing and the others quickly followed. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2197. After Chu Liyue and the rest left, Song Qing and the rest also dispersed and went to find their own residences. The figures on the star path quickly dissipated and became quiet again. Xiao Ran looked at the star path and seemed to be in a daze. After a long time, he turned and went back to his house. As he walked, he muttered, "It's so hard to find a good one, but he doesn't have a totem. Sigh, let's wait and see." The houses and courtyards here were all independent of each other and were quite far from each other. To a certain extent, it was convenient for everyone to cultivate and not disturb each other. When they passed by these courtyards, they would occasionally see some people cultivating. Some people were curious at first and wanted to greet them, but when they saw the tongues on their bodies, they became cold. Many of them did not even hide the contempt and ridicule in their eyes. There were also some who were focused on cultivating and did not pay attention to them at all. So, along the way, no one paid attention to them. Finally, Chu Liyue found a relatively large courtyard that could accommodate the 6 of them at the same time. After entering the courtyard and closing the door, little Hachi could not help but stomp her feet in anger. These people are too much. I've been looked down upon for so many years, but not as much as today. Isn't it just that I don't have a bloodline totem? Do they have to do this? Of course. Hua Shuangshuang shook her head and sighed. Have you forgotten what the 7th messenger said? People like us are destined to not be able to reach the heavens and become gods. In other words, no matter how much we cultivate, we will never be able to cross the threshold of becoming a god. In this way, they naturally have nothing to worry about. He grabbed the tongues tied to his waist and weighed them. Furthermore, we have to constantly worry about the words on it disappearing and the risk of being chased out at any time. Little Hachi snorted. Actually, she understood all this, but she found it unbearable. They had just arrived and they were already despised by everyone. How were they going to survive in the future? These are not important for now. Those who can come in and stay are considered to have completed the first step. Chu Luyue pinched little Hachi's face to comfort her. All right, don't be angry. Your wrinkles are coming out. Mistress. Little Hachi hugged her arm and leaned over to her. It's all little Hachi's fault for being useless. Not only did she fail to make Master proud, she even implicated Master and made Master a laughingstock. Chu Luyue smiled. This has nothing to do with you. People without totems were treated equally and looked down upon. This was the most fundamental problem. As for the fact that you're not Her Eminence, that's just an excuse. Everyone could see this clearly. Today is your first day here. Everyone, go back and rest. If there's anything, we can talk about it after you've adjusted your condition. Chu Luyue found a room and walked in. It was obvious that no one had lived here for a long time, but fortunately, it was very clean. As soon as she sat down, Dumpling couldn't help but shout. Ah you! Ah you! For safety's sake, Chu Luyue set up a barrier around the room before calling Dumpling out. Dumpling threw herself into her arms and asked anxiously, Ah you, did you see clearly if that was Grandpa Patriarch's feather? Chu Luyue patted her back to comfort her and said softly, Don't worry, it shouldn't be. She was familiar with Yi Zhao, so she could still distinguish it. When Jin Yunlai swept the feather across her forehead, she paid special attention to distinguish it. She was basically sure that it had nothing to do with Yi Zhao. Dumpling first heaved a sigh of relief, then became nervous again. But if it's not Grandpa Patriarch's, who could it be? Chu Luyue's heart skipped a beat. In fact, this was also the question she was thinking about. The crimson gold heavenly phoenix was an ancient divine beast with a revered status. It was difficult for ordinary people to even see it, let alone use its feather as a brush. No matter how powerful the people of the Illusion God Palace were, this was too much. Chu Luyue pondered for a long time and looked at Dumpling with uncertainty. Dumpling, actually. I feel that the feather's aura is a little familiar. Dumpling's grape-like eyes widened as she stuttered, What does that mean? Chu Luyue took a deep breath. The aura of that feather is very similar to the ancestor's golden feather. Jin Yunlai walked along the Star Road and finally arrived at the Black Jade Square in front of the Illusion God Palace. In the center of the quaint square, there was a piece missing. A person was standing in front of the Black Jade Square with his hands behind his back, gazing deeply. Hearing the sound, he turned around. This was a man who looked to be about 28 or 29 years old. He had handsome features and an elegant temperament. Only his eyes, which were filled with deep vicissitudes of life, showed that he was definitely not as young as he looked. You've brought everyone. Jin Yunlai bowed respectfully. They're all here. Their names have been recorded. As he spoke, he handed over the name list and the golden feather in his hands. The man took the items and flipped open the name list. As he read, he asked, I heard that there are 6 people without bloodline totems. Jin Yunlai said, Yes. 3 venerables, 3 exalted gods. The 3 exalted gods were all brought by a woman named Shengwan Yu. Shengwan Yu. The man chuckled. Interesting. Jin Yunlai's expression didn't change. If there are no accidents, the words Antoine Xinz will disappear within a month. At that time, they will also leave. That's a pity. That Shangguan you should be quite capable. Without a bloodline totem, it's useless no matter how talented they are. They won't be able to stay here for long. That's true. I wanted to take a look, forget it. The man closed the name list. What a pity. What a waste of a good name. Ancestor's golden feather. Hearing Chu Liuyue's words, Dumpling was stunned. But, that's not right. There's only one ancestor's golden feather in the clan, and it's with me. Back then, she had obtained this ancestor's golden feather because she had a pure bloodline. She had never heard of there being a second one in this world. Chu Liyue stared at Dumpling. Are you sure there's only one? I'm sure. Dumpling pointed at her forehead. Everyone uses this one to open their meridians. How can there be two? Chu Liyue frowned slightly. It wasn't that she hadn't thought of this before, but the aura of the one in Jin Yunlai's hand was too similar. There might be something fishy about this. Let's not rush to a conclusion. The most important thing now is to confirm whether De Bao and the others are here. Also, there's clan leader Yi Zhao. As she spoke, she stretched out her hand. A piece of purple scale armor lay quietly in her palm. Chapter 2198. A faint glow flickered on the scale armor. Then, a strong wave spread out from it. Something seemed to be summoning it from afar. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. She looked in the direction of the summoning power and frowned. This summoning came from the palace of the illusory god. At the same time, Dugu Mobao, who was trapped in the dark cage, suddenly opened his eyes. Yu is already here. He waved his hand lightly, and there seemed to be waves of light surging in his demonic purple eyes. That connection was instantly cut off. Chu Liyue looked at the purple scale armor in her hand in surprise. Just now, she clearly felt De Bao's aura, but why was it suddenly cut off? Chu Liyue looked up hesitantly and frowned. This seemed to be De Bao's doing. Ah Yu, what's wrong? Tuanzi ran over, hugged her thigh, and asked with her head raised. Did you find Grandpa De Bao? Chu Liyue put away the purple scale armor. Yes and no. What she could confirm now was that De Bao was indeed in the palace of the illusory god. But for some reason, he couldn't come out and even deliberately cut off the connection between him and her. It seemed that his situation wasn't optimistic. As for Lan Shao and Diwu Zhangze, there was no news at all. The palace of the illusory god was very big, and it would be very difficult to determine where they were. After all, she didn't even have the right to enter the palace of the illusory god. The palace of the illusory god was an extremely sacred and honorable existence here. On the star path, that person just raised his finger and was severely punished. It wasn't hard to imagine how dangerous it would be if she went there recklessly. With her current strength, she would probably be killed by the god envoys before she even reached the door. Dumpling frowned and looked worried. Then are they locked up now? Will they suffer a lot? Chu Liyue pinched her forehead and sighed helplessly. This should be the only answer. To be precise, the three of them had been locked up since 10,000 years ago. During this long period of time, they were suppressed under the Red Moon Desert, unable to come out at all. This was already an extremely harsh punishment. This time around, for some unknown reason, the three of them were brought here again and continued to be imprisoned. Chu Liyue vaguely felt that things were much more complicated than he had expected. We can only wait and see. Chu Liyue looked at Dumpling. Dumpling, can you sense Senior Yi Zhao's aura? Or other clansmen? Dumpling closed her eyes and carefully sensed for a while. Then, she shook her head dejectedly. No, there's nothing at all. Chu Luiyue touched her round hair bun. There's no hurry. Since we're already here, we should be able to find some clues. Dumpling pursed her lips. After comforting Dumpling, Chu Luiyue started to meditate in the room. The earth energy here was very rich and pure. Even the Peach Blossom Cove could not compare to it. Apart from other things, this was indeed a holy land for cultivation. Bam! The sound of an explosion suddenly came from outside. Chu Luiyue opened her eyes and got up strangely. Then, she went to the window. She pushed open the window and looked outside. She saw a stream of light rushing up in midair. Then, it bloomed in midair, forming a bright silver spark. Chu Luiyue took a closer look and realized that she had seen wrongly. That was not an ordinary spark, but a Xian formation. This is a Xian formation from the star passage. She muttered softly. Swoosh. Several sounds of something breaking through the air could be heard. In the surrounding courtyards, there were actually people who had soared into the air. Their gazes were focused on the Xian formation that suddenly bloomed. It's an illusory illumination formation. That's a great master-level Xian formation. It's extremely complicated. Last time, I only stared at it for 15 minutes and almost fainted. Who's comprehending the illusory reflection formation? She looks a little familiar. Who else could it be? Mu Yafeng. Hiss. I remember that she just finished comprehending those great master-level Xian formations. How did she start to break through to the great master level in the blink of an eye? Her goal is to comprehend all the Xian formations on the star passage and enter the illusory god palace. Do you think she has no goals like you? Her aptitude as a Xian master is extremely high. It's not something an ordinary person can compare to. The rest of us can only be envious. Hearing these words, Chu Luiyue's heart moved. She pushed open the door and walked out. Standing in the courtyard, she could see the Xian formation blooming in midair more clearly. It was complicated, beautiful, and dazzling. A great master-level Xian formation was indeed extraordinary. Thinking of the conversation between those people just now, Chu Luiyue cupped her hands towards a middle-aged man not far away and asked, "May I ask this senior, as long as I comprehend all the Xian formations on the star passage, I can enter the illusory god palace?" Hearing Chu Luiyue's voice, the man turned his head and looked over. He sneered softly, "That's right. The Xian formations on the star passage are divided into different areas according to their levels. The closer one is to the illusory god palace, the higher the level of the Xian formation, and the harder it is to comprehend. As long as you can comprehend all the Xian formations on it, you can obtain the qualifications to enter the illusory god palace." Saying this, his gaze moved to the Tuan Xinz tied to Chu Luiyue's waist, carrying a bit of contempt. "However, you don't need to think about it. It's impossible." Chu Luiyue was startled. Just at this time, a somewhat familiar sloppy voice came from the other side. The lady just came. You guys should be more polite, right?" Chu Luiyue turned around, Senior Xiao Ran. Xiao Ran lazily leaned against the door frame again. "No need to call me senior. Just call me Xiao Ran." Chu Luiyue smiled faintly. Xiao Ran said this because he didn't care about these things. However, Chu Luiyue had a good impression of him, so calling him senior was still appropriate. "Xiao Ran, what does this have to do with you? If you have the time, why don't you think about how to break through?" The middle-aged man who was criticized coldly snorted. "Again, am I not telling the truth? She doesn't have a bloodline totem, and will be driven out in a month. Wanting to comprehend all the Xian formations on the star passage is simply wishful thinking." Xiao Ran nodded. "You're not wrong. However, she's not even 20 years old, yet she can come to the illusory god palace. Who knows how many people who relied on their bloodline power to come here, but couldn't break through. Aren't you the same? You. That middle-aged man saw that Xiao Ran couldn't win, so he simply stopped arguing. With a wave of his sleeve, he returned to his room. If he had the time, he might as well cultivate on his own. Seeing this, the others didn't say anything. Obviously, they were quite afraid of Xiao Ran. Chu Luiyue smiled at Xiao Ran. Many thanks, Senior Xiao Ran. Jin Yunlai. Chu Luiyue thought for a moment. No wonder Jin Yunlai was so proud when she mentioned the star path. It turned out that she had the right to be proud. She thought for a moment and decided to give it a try. This was the only way to enter the illusory god palace openly. She thanked Xiao Ran again, turned around, and headed in the direction of the star path. Xiao Ran asked, "Hey, you're going now?" Chu Luiyue stopped in her tracks. Yeah. Even if she could wait, De Bao and the others might not be able to. Seeing her anxious look, Xiao Ran thought she was worried that the words on the lump of tongue would disappear and she would be kicked out of the illusory god palace. Go, go. It's always good for young people to learn more things. If there's anything you don't know, just ask me directly. Chu Luiyue was a little surprised. Won't this disturb you? Xiao Ran looked up. No, I'm too bored. Chu Luiyue. Then I'll thank you in advance. Xiao Ran waved her hand and turned back to the house. Chu Luiyue retracted her gaze and headed toward the star path. The star path started from the door and extended all the way to the illusory god palace. The place where Chu Luiyue lived was coincidentally near the door. In other words, the section where the Xian formation level was relatively low. Since she wanted to comprehend it all, she naturally had to start from the beginning. Chu Luiyue came to the door again. The black jade path under the door was covered with specks of light. Chu Luiyue stepped on it, looked forward, and took a deep breath. This path was very long, and she didn't know how long it stretched. Only the illusory god palace at the far end stood tall, sacred and noble. Hey, someone wants to comprehend the Xian formation from the beginning. Is she planning to walk the star path? I don't know. Is she new? Yes, she's new. Do you see the lump of tongue on her waist? Looking at her age and appearance, she should be the Shangguanyu who brought the 3 high gods here. Pfft. So it's her. Without a bloodline totem, why did she come to the star path? She might as well use this time to find some precious Xian formations to finish her study. Chu Luiyue's arrival attracted a lot of attention. Many people from both sides of the star path came out to take a look. Obviously, they didn't think highly of Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue ignored these voices and looked down at the first speck of light under her feet. She flicked her finger, and a ray of force flew out and landed on the speck of light. Sensing it, the speck of light quickly became clear. A complicated and dazzling Xian formation appeared in front of her. This was a Xian formation at the level of a Xian King Master. 1,000 Leaves Formation. Chu Luiyue recognized it at a glance. Then, with a thought, several rays of light flew out from her fingers and intertwined in the air. In a few breaths' time, an identical Xian formation was completed. She pushed her palm lightly, and the Xian formation floated down and landed on top of the 1,000 Leaves Formation, perfectly overlapping. Bang! A cluster of silver sparks flew up. 1,000 Leaves Formation, broken. The noisy crowd suddenly quieted down. After a while, someone exclaimed, "So fast." They didn't even have time to see what had happened, and the 1,000 Leaves Formation had actually exploded. That's a Xian King Master level Xian formation. It's not difficult. It'll be difficult to move forward after that, someone explained. That's true. Maybe, bang. Before the crowd could finish speaking, they heard another explosion. A cluster of silver sparks bloomed on top of Chu Liuyue's head. Because this Xian formation's level wasn't high, the commotion wasn't as great as the previous illusory illumination formation. However, the spectators standing nearby were still shocked when they saw this. Even if this was only a Xian King Master level Xian formation, it was still too fast. Looking at this formation, she should be a great Xian King Master, right? I heard that she's not even 20 yet. Isn't this talent too strong? So what? Without a bloodline totem, everything is just a waste. If I were her, I definitely wouldn't waste time on this. All kinds of voices entered her ears. Chu Liyue continued forward as if she didn't hear them. Chapter 2200. To the current Chu Liyue, a Xian King Master level Xian formation was indeed not difficult at all. Although she had never seen most of the Xian formations here, she could still analyze them at a glance and quickly use them. Bang! 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 On the Star Road, explosions sounded one after another. The surrounding crowd still had various methods at first, but they all shut their mouths in the end when they heard the sound of sparks bursting out continuously. When Chu Liyue used dozens of Xian formations without any hindrance, she was still full of energy and had no intention of stopping to rest. Everyone finally realized that their initial prediction seemed to be completely wrong. This woman's strength was clearly far beyond their imagination. Time slowly passed as Chu Liyue walked forward step by step. More and more people came out to watch from both sides. When Chu Liyue drew the 100th Xian formation, someone finally couldn't help but ask, how many are there already? Why doesn't she have any intention of stopping? Using so many Xian formations in one go, even a great Xian King Master can't take it, right? No one answered. Because at this moment, they had the same doubts in their hearts. For so many years, it wasn't that no one in the illusory God Palace had done this. In fact, there were many people who tried to walk the Star Road. But it was really rare to see someone so fierce right from the start. Chu Liyue's expression was calm and focused. The flowing light in her hand didn't seem to stop as it flew out continuously and condensed into new Xian formations. There were at least tens of thousands of Xian formations on this Star Road. This was just the beginning. Time passed quickly. In a side hall of the illusory God Palace, Jin Yunlai put down the book in her hand and stood up to go outside. Looking from afar, one could vaguely see a slender and exquisite figure on the Star Road, walking forward step by step. Silver sparks flew into the air, illuminating the path ahead of her with dazzling light. She still hasn't stopped. A hint of surprise flashed across Jin Yunlai's eyes. She already knew about this from the moment Chu Liyue stepped on the Star Road. She originally thought that she was ignorant and fearless, so she tried to start from the beginning. However, from the looks of it now, he did indeed have some confidence to dare to do so. Is that your Shangguan Yu from before? A gentle and elegant voice came from behind her. Jin Yunlai looked back and wasn't surprised that he suddenly appeared here. She nodded. I originally thought that she would stop soon and give up. But I didn't expect, she should still be at the stage of Xian King Master level, right? Yes. But that's the least. The real difficulty is yet to come. That's still very. This speed is speed, compared to your speed back then. Jin Yunlai Pai paused slightly. She is indeed very talented in this aspect. That's even more unfortunate, the man laughed. However, this way, she will be able to stay here for a while longer. I'm curious as to where she can go. Set's expression. By Yayo. Without a bloodline totem, she is destined to not be able to enter the illusory god palace. Mu Yafeng, on the other hand, has already comprehended more than half of the Xian formations at the Great Grandmaster level. Her future is promising. She's not bad. You should pay more attention. Yes. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Chu Luiyue was still standing on the Star Road. Not only did the words on the letter on her waist not fade, but they were even more vivid than before. Chapter 2201. If this trend continued, she would be able to stay in the illusory god palace for a long time. More and more people gathered around. In the beginning, most of them only came to join in the fun, wanting to see what kind of waves Chu Luiyue, who didn't have a bloodline totem, could create. However, as time passed, their mentality gradually changed. In the past few days, the strength Chu Luiyue had displayed was already much stronger than many of them. Even though she was still breaking Xian King Master level Xian formations, her speed was extremely fast. From the moment she stepped on the Star Road until now, she hadn't slept or rested for several days straight, constantly comprehending Xian formations. The number gradually accumulated, and it was already very impressive, even shocking. If this continued, it wouldn't be long before she started comprehending Great Xian King Master level Xian formations. Bang! A familiar sound was heard. Chu Luiyue raised her eyes and looked forward. A silver spark gradually bloomed in midair, forming an extremely complicated Xian formation. She narrowed her eyes slightly. That Xian formation, why did it look so familiar? Unfortunately, it was too far away, and she couldn't see it clearly. When the crowd heard the commotion, they all turned to look in that direction. Another great master level Xian formation. Isn't Mu Yafeng's speed a little too fast? It seems like only a few days have passed since she last comprehended it. Yeah. With her efficiency, I reckon that she can really comprehend all the Xian formations on this Star Road, right? I heard that the 7th Divine Emissary also thinks highly of her. I reckon that she can really succeed. As the Xian formation gradually dissipated, Chu Luiyue also retracted her gaze and continued to study the Xian formations under her feet. Compared to the liveliness on Chu Luiyue's side, Mu Yafeng's side was much quieter. Both sides of the Star Road were empty, and there was almost no one. This wasn't because everyone didn't want to come, but because they didn't dare. This road was covered with great master-level Xian formations. Even if it was sealed by a thin layer of black jade, it still emitted a faint pressure. Those with average strength would find it difficult to even walk here, let alone other things. Another reason was that this place was closer to the illusory god palace. Everyone respected and admired it, so they didn't dare to act rashly. Even if they wanted to have a private discussion, they definitely wouldn't choose this place. A young woman who looked to be in her mid-20s was standing in the middle of the road. She was wearing a light green dress and had an elegant appearance. There was a hint of arrogance in her eyes. At this moment, she was slightly raising her head and looking at the profound formation that was blooming above her head. Her eyes were filled with joy. A figure walked over from the front. She retracted her gaze. When she saw who it was, she smiled and bowed. Greetings, 7th Divine Envoy. Jin Yunlai stood not far away from her. Her usually cold and serious face had a rare trace of gentleness. The Heavenly Net Profound Formation is one of the hardest formations to learn among the Grandmaster level profound formations. You did well to be able to comprehend it so quickly. Mu Yafeng lowered her head slightly and humbly replied, 7th Oracle, you flatter me. Actually, Yafeng has been stuck here for many years. It was only recently that I was able to comprehend it. The Heavenly Net Profound Formation and the Heavenly Illumination Illusory Formation both started with the word Tian. She obviously knew how difficult it was to comprehend it. To outsiders, she had deciphered these two profound formations in just a few days. In fact, she had tried countless times in private over the years. Therefore, she didn't become complacent in the face of Jin Yunlai's praise. Jin Yunlai's face showed some satisfaction. Mu Yafeng's talent wasn't bad. She was neither arrogant nor rash, which was even rarer. In the illusory god palace, there was no lack of geniuses. However, there weren't many who could walk step by step to the end. This was also one of the reasons why he was particularly optimistic about Mu Yafeng. You have already comprehended more than half of the profound formations here. However, the remaining ones all start with the word Tian. You can't let your guard down. Yafeng understands. Jin Yunlai was about to continue when he suddenly heard a commotion in the distance. His eyebrows moved slightly as he looked up. When Mu Yafeng heard the commotion, she also turned around to take a look. Jin Yunlai murmured, "It seems that they have entered the area of the Grand Xian King Division's profound formations." It was really faster than he had expected. This speed had already surpassed Mu Yafeng's back then. Thinking of this, he glanced at Mu Yafeng. Mu Yafeng felt a little baffled and laughed. "Seventh Divine Envoy, haven't you always only cared about the Xian masters who entered the area of the Grand Xian King Division's profound formations? When did you become so concerned about those who entered the area of the Grand Xian King Division's profound formations?" She asked this purely because she really didn't know what was going on. When Chu Luyue and the others entered the illusory god palace, she was cultivating. After coming out, she directly went to the star passage and continued to comprehend the profound formations. The commotion caused by Chu Luyue's comprehension of the profound formations was very small. She was very far away and focused on the profound formation in front of her, so she naturally didn't know anything. Jin Yunlai simply explained, "It's a newcomer who just stepped onto the star passage 4 days ago." These few words instantly caused Mu Yafeng's expression to change. 4 days? She asked in disbelief. Jin Yunlai nodded. Only then did Mu Yafeng understand why Jin Yunlai looked at her with such a gaze just now. This newcomer's performance had already surpassed her previous self. It seems that another rare genius has arrived. She paused for a moment and said. But she doesn't have a bloodline totem. Jin Yunlai shook his head, his face expressionless. Even with his strict and picky eyes, that woman was indeed very outstanding. The only pity was that she didn't have a bloodline totem. This cut off all possibilities. Mu Yafeng instantly heaved a sigh of relief in her heart, but she didn't show it on her face. Then, "It's really a pity. Ignore her. You just have to continue comprehending the profound formations." Mu Yafeng retracted her gaze and smiled lightly. "Yes." Jin Yunlai glanced in that direction again and quickly turned to leave. After Chu Luyue comprehended the last profound formation at the level of a Mystic King Master, he arrived at the area where the great Mystic King Master's profound formations were. The light spots here were obviously brighter than the previous ones, and the pressure was also stronger. Seeing Chu Luyue arrive, the surrounding crowd became even quieter, and their eyes were almost unblinking as they stared at him. The profound formations from before were basically not difficult to comprehend. But from now on, it would be different. Even if she was a great Mystic King Master herself, it would be very difficult for her to comprehend all of these. Not to mention, every time she constructed a profound formation, the mental energy and strength consumed would be much more than before. Chu Luyue sent out a stream of force, and a profound formation instantly appeared under his feet. She lowered her head to take a look and was stunned. This profound formation. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.